Chapter 1. Cockroach Commentator. So, exactly how did I get here? One afternoon, I helped pour 200 cockroaches of various sizes over a woman in a wetsuit in a bathtub. Now, while it sounds like some bizarre foreign movie shown very late at night with barely legible subtitles and a shaky storyline, or maybe one hell of a way to get your kicks, it was actually part of this local woman's entry to try and win tickets in a national competition to see the V8 supercars at Bathurst, or as we like to call it around the office, another day in radio. Yes, that's correct. She said she'd willingly bathe in a sea of god-awful cockroaches for the chance to win tickets to a motorsport event. Picture the hysterics in your own house when someone gets surprised from a nasty cockroach racing from one side of the kitchen to the other, let alone one of the disgusting little beasties brushing against your skin, and multiply that level of anxiousness by a couple of hundred in a place you'd least want to encounter a cockroach, in a relaxing bath. And since it was a radio competition and we're a radio station, it was up to us to supply the tub, the roaches, and commentate while all the hissing, squirming, screaming cockroach action was happening. You can just picture the army of raised eyebrows when that email went around the office. You can also imagine the part of me that thought, all those job applications to try and nail a gig in radio. All those long nights, early starts, weekend work, and years of experience in the industry, working with some of the most talented people around and inspiring to be the king of the radio castle. And look where it's taken you. You're now pouring cockroaches all over a woman in a bathtub at the back of your work. Incredibly, it wasn't that hard to source those things in the space of one afternoon. It truly is amazing what you can find for sale around this town. Before you could say, Kim, that was her name, why do you think this was a good idea? A bathtub was lined up at the back of the station, and the promotions team were armed with more than a few boxes of fresh cockroaches from the nearest pet store. Somewhere out there was someone's pet praying mantis, going hungry for Kim's chance to see some snarling V8s race furiously around the Bathurst racetrack. The bathtub, well, that was a leftover from a recent renovation, which was very lucky as we didn't think it was possible to borrow one from the nearest bathroom store for the purpose of a cockroach bath. Don't worry, we'll clean it up before you put it back on display. As for the idea of a cockroach shower itself, well, that was all Kim, the contestant's doing. The challenge was to offer to do something truly amazing and different for the chance to win, and her concept impressed the afternoon radio show so much they agreed. If she went through the insect bath, she'd get to go to Bathurst. And so on that sunny afternoon, a great day for a bug bath, suddenly I found myself in the role of cockroach commentator, which in all honesty is not really a role you can really study up on. For a start, we were using bog standard cockroaches, and nobody really had the time to number them. Since there were 200 of them, that's not even a job I'd like to inflict on the nastiest of work experience kids. So I didn't bother giving them any names. Secondly, there were only 2 locations they could go. Over Kim or somewhere else in the bath, so any hope of an actual race call were dashed. Still, as strange jobs go, how many people can claim the title of Intense Insect Action Commentator down on their resume? Kim came dressed for the occasion, hair tied back and clad in the thickest wetsuit she could find with goggles just in case one of the roaches had a fetish for eyeballs. Now, being not a fan of the roach kind in general, if it was me in the bath, I'd be keeping myself comfortable in the finest of riot gear and a flamethrower. She jumped in the bath, we recorded up a quick chat pre-pouring and screaming, and then it was roach time. Now, if the cockroaches made any noise, it was completely drowned out by the squealing, which came in equal parts from both Kim getting a roach shower and the promotions team unboxing our roach army and pouring away. The scene was reminiscent of lifting up 50 fridges at once at the sleaziest motel in the world and watching every bug race out from underneath. Having no idea where to start calling the action, I resorted to things like, yes, guys, they're swimming up her legs. Holy hell, there's one dancing on her face. Kim, are you okay in there? Kim, talk to me. And you know what? I'm so glad I'm not in that bath. The cockroaches raced around, they crawled, they beat each other up to become media sensations. A few got caught in her hair and plenty were squashed by her moving about. After a couple of minutes, we figured that was more than enough time to spend in a bathtub full of critters, and I was also running out of ways to say, they're crawling all over her, and carefully helped her out. You have no idea how slippery a bath can get with a whole heap of roach carcasses smooshed inside of it, picking off any stragglers still holding on. Figuring we'd have no use for the bugs, we dragged the bath over to the grass, there's a massive tract of land behind us, and tipped it over, letting them all roam free. I can only assume the local bird life had the greatest time ever with our free all-you-can-eat bug buffet, aka Swarm. Kim ran off for a long hot shower and some possible therapy. The bath went off to the local rubbish tip and I went back to the office side of my job. answering emails and drinking as much instant coffee as possible, hoping like crazy that I wouldn't find a survivor of the challenge lurking under my cup. Yuck. From the email and the pictures that she sent a couple of weeks later, it looked like Kim enjoyed her time at Bathurst immensely. The afternoon team also sent me a thank you email for my impromptu cockroach commentating, which was nice. I'm also happy to report that none of the kitchen areas in the radio station suddenly had a completely mysterious cockroach outbreak all of a sudden. Luckily, we didn't decide to use the same idea when the monster trucks came to town. Chapter 2. Whatever you do, don't flip it. As driving lessons go, this one was a doozy. Don't hammer on the accelerator or you'll flip the vehicle over. This happened 6 times last year, according to the usual driver. Don't sit in the one spot idling for more than 60 seconds, otherwise the cabin will start to fill with methanol fumes and you'll be boiling in your helmet and you'll have no idea why. This switch here locks the back tyres up and helps with tight turns, and if you get out of control, we will shut you down remotely. Got it? Good luck. Wait. Welcome to my sub 5-minute lesson in how to drive a monster truck. The hilarious part was that I wasn't supposed to be in this particular truck to begin with. The monster trucks had a big show at the showgrounds on Saturday, and in the interest of publicity and noise-making, my radio co-host Alex and I were asked if we'd like to compete in a monster truck drag race. We'd each get a medium-sized monster truck, medium in engine capacity more than physical dimensions, they're still monsters after all, and once given the signal, we'd race in opposite directions, circle a nearby witch's hat, and race back. First one to cross the line gets to hang plenty of shit on the other on the show, and don't forget to see the professionals do it this Saturday, gates open at 6, etc., etc. Well, that was the plan. Arriving at the showgrounds that Thursday morning, we were slightly surprised to see a grand total of 0 monster trucks, making a monster truck drag race a touch on the difficult side. Change your plan, boys, the promoter sighed. One of the trucks I was planning to use for this has blown a head gasket and is out of action. Considering how much it cost to fix my first car's head gasket back in the day, I shuddered at the bill of doing the same with the monster truck. But it's okay, I've put a call out and the boys are picking up my truck at the moment. We'll get you in for a spin in that one, and the fastest lap wins it. It took a few moments for it to dawn on me from previous conversations that the truck he was talking about now, his pride and joy, was his competition-level monster truck that travelled the world crushing cars with mad abandon, complete with 1,600 horsepower methanol-fueled Merlin plane engine. Forget Monsters Inc. As monsters go, this thing had a complete and utter take-no-prisoners attitude, and this guy was about to throw the keys. Well, the start button over to 2 random radio announcers. Oh dear. Shortly after, a big semi-trailer truck arrived with a yellow juggernaut on board, sending a chill down everyone from the station's spines, on account of the sheer size of this war machine. And then they switched it on. Now, the showgrounds here in town have a few giant sheds for the Sunday markets and other events throughout the year, and I swear that the first rev of this animal ripped right through them all, before echoing back like a furious thunderclap. I was surprised the noise didn't tear through the clouds and send a downpour our way, or that the gods suddenly didn't appear to request that we turn down the noise. And we were supposed to take this thing for a quick spin? A quick flip of the coin netted me the first spin in the monster of all monsters, and suddenly I was sweating like crazy. And that was before they threw on the steel plate-like racing jacket and helmet. I climbed the steps, making sure I completely avoided the exhaust, which would apparently melt skin off faster than you could say, "What was that?" and proceeded to get my helmeted head stuck in the roll cage. Clever me. Once I freed myself and crawled in, I discovered that a monster truck is the complete opposite of the time-travelling TARDIS from the TV series Doctor Who. It's huge on the outside, with barely any room inside, once you put all the buttons, switches, and a padded-up radio announcer in there. Being that high up in the air also makes visibility a complete challenge, unless you're looking head-on at a similar-sized truck or maybe a car pile. Once strapped in nice and tight, the quick lesson began before he fired up the engine, rendering any further conversation completely useless. Happily, he explained that he wouldn't tell Alex about the switch, which locks up the back wheels, allowing for tighter cornering, which he said should hopefully give me the edge, provided I didn't stuff anything else up. Well, here's hoping. He flicked the switch and drowned the entire world out with furious roaring before yelling something I completely missed. Good luck. Don't press the red button. Nice knowing you. No idea. Before jumping out and leaving the control of the truck from hell in the hands of someone who prefers his seats only a few inches off the ground and his engines at a noise level able to be talked over. The starter waved, and I just lightly tapped the pedal to get my lap going, only to find the beast raced forward faster than a turbo-fed cheetah on steroids, and because of it, I almost broke the steering wheel with my white-knuckled grip of fear. With the truck's all-or-nothing attitude combined with the visibility of the skyline and not much else, getting this battleship around anything was a challenge, considering I only had a vague idea of where I was supposed to turn. Happily though, as I flicked on the lock switch, the beast slid around perfectly, and I lightly tapped the pedal again to get it rumbling to the next turn. The second lap was a hell of a lot smoother than the first, but that's saying something when attempting to pilot something the size of a house that has you shaking like a violent washing machine with every rev. I kind of guessed where the finishing line was and hit the brakes, discovering that I was still shaking with excitement in my seat, even with the engine off. No hitting the kill switch, no remote shut-off. I'd made it with all my favourite body parts intact. Hooray! I completely missed Alex's turn though. Instead, happily explaining, once my hearing returned to nearby mates, the glory of the wheel lock switch. How I couldn't see anything, and my God, was that the best thing ever. I was still shaking roughly an hour later though, back in the studio looking at all the pictures. The show on Saturday was amazing, and the experts made it look so easy. Although I'm sure my father-in-law Barry got a bit tired of me talking about the yellow truck every 5 minutes while we were there though. And there's this button, and it does this. For the record, Alex beat me by a second. But hey, I got to drive a 1600 horsepower snorting monster truck and live to tell the tale. And let's be honest here, we're probably not going to find ourselves in a challenge of that magnitude ever again, so I'm very, very glad that I put my hand up for this one. Thankfully, I didn't have to lend a hand to fix the original broken one either, as there's been more than one time where using tools have gotten away from me. Chapter 3, Tire Iron Man. So, I've been attacked by a tire iron. Now, before you grab your rusty pitchforks and barbed wire baseball bats and some kind of vigilante-style militia justice to avenge this, let it be known that I'm okay. I'd like to think that I'm made of pretty strong stuff. Well, strong enough to survive a smack in the jaw with an unforgiving tire iron, and so I won't be the recipient of any bruised radio announcers fund anytime soon. Also, please note that the attacker was actually me. Yes, indeed, I managed to completely brain myself with a 4-way tire iron and part of my fist, right into a punch that'd make Australian boxing champion Danny Green proud. The accident happened while working on a snug-fitting rim on my girlfriend's, now wife's, Holden VT Commodore, after her ex-mechanic dad, now my father-in-law, replaced the tie rod end and rubber boot on it. For the non-mechanical, he replaced some things that were getting worn out. Then it was up to me to get the tyre back on and keep it staying on. And since this was not my first replacing a wheel rodeo, it was supposed to be a walk in the park. Except this time, both the tyre iron and myself were covered in grease, oil, mud, dirt, and whatever the hell else was in those torn rubbers from the old CV boot. Picture a substance slimier and grimier than a dodgy used car manager with a lemon tree, covering everything. So naturally, after a bit of flexing and leveraging action to get the nut on tighter than the local tax office, before I knew it, the tyre iron had slipped off the wheel nut and came zooming at my chin at full pelt. Now, I can tell you that copping this unforgiving steel is about as much fun as copping a sledgehammer right to the parts that make being a man fun. I felt like the car itself had run into my face at full speed, and in the moment I felt it highly important to let out some colourful words that would have impressed the roughest-looking bricklayer. Something about the iron's mother having very loose morals from memory. I wasn't knocked out or seeing stars, but it sure felt like someone had tried to give it their best shot. The good news was that after I picked myself up, breathed deeply, and threatened to kill the completely oblivious tyre iron, I finished the job without any further hitches or injury. The wheel was back on, and now on so firmly, nothing short of a circus strongman or heavy-duty air tool was going to get it off again. And as a completely unwanted bonus, I also ended up with a nice collection of bruises on one side of my jawline, with one side of my face staying very tender for the next few days. This would have actually looked impressive if I told people I'd been busy street fighting instead of attempting to put on a tyre, something I've done many times previously without managing to punch myself out. After learning of my sorry tale of mechanical woe and making sure that my jaw wasn't likely to drop off in the middle of the family dinner, the father-in-law could only chuckle at my predicament. Thanks, Baz. I'm sure there were many times during his many helpful mechanical lessons over the years where he might have wondered if I'd be better learning something a little safer, like painting rocks or stacking small phone books. And just in case you're wondering, the tyre iron itself was okay. Actually, it was more than fine, seemingly unconcerned about being chin-butted by an amateur mechanic midway through a basic service. I'm also happy to report that after this little outing, I've never had the misfortune of attacking myself with a tire iron ever again. I did, however, end up just as sore soon enough when attempting to train with a man who probably should have been wearing a cape. Chapter 4. Don't train with Superman. Lucky me, I trained with Superman. Okay, no, it wasn't the legitimate son of Krypton and Man of Steel in person, but for all intents and purposes, he may have well been Superman for making me look like a kindergarten student at Hogwarts in comparison. For the sake of your pride, kids, don't train with Superman. Just don't. His name was actually Jason, and he would have had a hard time not making the chiseled Spartans of the blockbuster movie 300 look on in admiration. Built like a well-proportioned muscle car, he was at one of the weekly training sessions I occasionally gasped through, mainly to be part of the photo shoot the place was having for a big spread in the papers on the weekend. He worked as a trainer there, loved every second of being there, and if I'm not mistaken, probably slept there, balanced perfectly on one leg on top of a kettlebell. Eat, sleep, lift and throw around some tanks, make it look incredibly easy, wash, repeat. And with his twisted steel physique and flawless fitness lifestyle, and probably stricter diet than mine, and assistance with protein powder and fitness supplements, and undoubtedly more workouts than my occasional 1.5 hours per week, when he does anything in the gym, it really puts us mere mortals back in our place. So, when he dances around twirling monstrous barbells with the greatest of ease, the same ones I'm struggling just to get off the rack, it does put our respective fitness abilities at complete polar opposites. Attempting to keep pace with this powerhouse through the day's grueling circuit was like a horse and cart trying to keep up with a cheetah, chugging on rocket fuel. And it probably didn't help feeling like I danced with a dump truck a couple of days earlier at Monday's training session. My arms were already not feeling up to the task at hand, thanks to the Bench Press Monday Madness Marathon. So watching Jason practically bounce the stacked bar off his palms with every lift made my former guns feel like spitball tubes. By the time I'd wheezed through the first 4 rounds of bench presses and dips, Super Dude had powered halfway through the session without the slightest indication of breaking a sweat. At push-up stage, my arms gave up the ghost with every third up. He almost propelled himself through the very high ceiling. 20 reps? Not a problem. He blitzed through them like the weight plates were empty. The same 20 reps for yours truly? Better stop the clock, as it'll run out of batteries before I get past 15. After the longest 45 minutes of my life, I became one with the nearest seat as my pectoral muscles attempted to self-combust. But through the haze of that powder that serious lifters use to increase bar grip, the Prince of Power stood proudly, looking like what I'd barely struggled to get through was simply a warm-up, and he was ready for the main course. Apparently, the Man Machine was back later that night, hosting a class, and just as energetic as he was earlier. Undoubtedly, it was probably after he rewarded himself with a quick 60k run, with 100 kilos strapped to his ankles for fun. Of course, it's all relative. When he wakes up daily, there's a nutritious meal waiting, and he'll exercise with mad abandon for the first of probably many sessions of the day. He's probably been focused like this for years. When I wake up, I head straight to the nearest coffee pot, and then proceed to sit on my ass and talk crap for the next 4 hours. And I have years of experience to back it up. So Jason, thanks for the opportunity to train next to an absolute athlete at the peak of his prowess. But kids, I'll leave you with this very handy tip. If you think you're going well in your fitness, don't train with Superman, unless you're absolutely certain your confidence won't come off the worse for it, like mine has. Or do what I should have done, and that's turn up with a trunkload of kryptonite tucked in your workout shorts just in case. Chapter 5. How much without the doors? God, my car seems to be cursed. And not in a start you bastard or you're getting a one-way tow to the crushers sort of thing first thing in the morning. More in a yes, I'm interested in the fact that you're selling it, but not interested enough to actually show up to look at it in person like I told you I would type of curse. Wonderful. So currently, I have my car for sale. It's pretty cheap for what it is, and I haven't plowed it through any walls, that I remember anyway. But for all purposes, it seems I'm driving the automotive equivalent of chopped liver. In the month and a bit of my 1991 Toyota Sora, twin-turbo leather with sunroof, brum brum, being advertised, I've had 3 inquirers, all with increasing levels of interest. But not with enough interest to actually come and look at the damn thing, which is usually step 1 in selling it off typically. Potential buyer number 1, the Mad Messenger. The ad clearly reads, no roadworthy certificate, due to the fact that I have no time to get one or the funds currently. So, of course, the first text message that shows up asks if it comes with a roadworthy certificate. Brilliant start. It continued to roll completely downhill from there. I text back. No, sorry, don't have time.
Don't have time either. No thanks.
Seconds later.
What's the absolute least rock bottom price you'll take?
$3,500. Firm. No lower.
$1,500?
Not a chance.
No, sorry, not interested.
2 weeks later, exactly the same lowball offer came through as a message, which I promptly ignored. If I agreed to his price, which was never going to happen for him anyway, for the simple fact that he annoyed me, then more than likely he'd fail to show up anyway. Potential buyer number 2, late night caller. Now, my wife actually had to nudge me awake because it was 10 to 11 at night when he called to ask about the car. Yes, that horrible PM hour for a breakfast radio announcer when the last thing you want to do is talk cars when you're desperately crying out for some sleep. But still, after being completely unfazed over me asking why the hell he was calling at that time, he rolled through a series of questions. I mumbled through some answers, and he promised to text me when he had a possible time to come up for a look. That's a good start. True to his word, he texted me yesterday to explain he'd brought a car closer to him, and that was it. I wonder if he called that poor bastard at a time when the rest of the world was sleeping too. Potential buyer number 3, 2-pronged anticlimax. It started with a call from a guy who was ringing on behalf of a friend. Yeah, sure, a friend. He had a few questions, and after working out that I hadn't used the words fully sick, hectic bro, and you love it, yo, at any stage, nor pointed out that I was a big of a dreamer as the previous owner, he realised I was genuine, and he relayed this to his mate. This in turn led to a series of text messages and requests for close-up photos, including the boot and the seats and what worked and what didn't. The air conditioner did work, it just came with a screen that didn't, so you had to guess which button did what. A time was then worked out for a test drive along with a rough price, and if things went well, he'd drive it back home that very day. Glory be! It looked like I was well on my way to getting my carport space back. However, he texted a couple of hours later, explaining that he'd just scored a company car, and therefore would have to pass on my offer. But thank you for all the photos and the replies. Yes, he said he, not this mysterious mate. And amazingly, the offer of a company car turned up on a Sunday. Yeah. Completely plausible explanation. That must be it. Told you it was cursed. Just ask the local authorities, who found themselves very interested in it one particular afternoon. Chapter 6. Hands behind your head and exit the vehicle slowly. I got pulled over this afternoon, just meters away from my house, for a completely random license check. The good news is that I'm not the brazen criminal the local police force are looking for. Who will lead me in a grand chorus of huzzah? Huzzah! I had a sneaky suspicion I might have to fish out my details halfway home from work, when the fairly obvious undercover patrol car drove past mine, then all of a sudden executed a swift turn and started following me. Of course, I was hoping he was interested in the cars behind me, but no. He weaved around them, flashed the lights, and suddenly I was less than 10 metres away from the house, sincerely hoping my car suddenly didn't decide to leak 10 litres of oil on the spot right in front of him. Now, I didn't think anything was obviously smoking or dropping bits, but with all the cars I've owned during my time driving, you never know. Just a quick license check, he said. I handed it over, and he gave my hilariously impractical Toyota Sora a quick look over. This isn't related to a Nissan Skyline by any chance, he asked. I explained that it was more akin to a Toyota Supra than a Skyline, and then had to explain why it had Lexus badges on it. A story that he nodded at while he carefully looked through the window for any explosives, contraband, firearms, spare hatchets, or Mexicans smuggled across the border. You still working on the radio? He then asked. It's always nice to meet a fan. He then took my license for a check back with the base and came back quite happy that I hadn't had a driving infraction since Danny Minogue was popular. He also explained the reason for getting me to pull over. Apparently he thought someone else was driving it. And it just so happened that the car looked very similar to one that was racing around town, complete with a lookalike driver, just like me. Maybe it's the shaved head I like to sport, coupled with the 3-day menacing facial hair. Who doesn't actually hold a current driver's license, and a list of infractions longer than your leg. Although, on closer inspection, the car he was looking for was actually more silver than gold. Or metallic beige in my case, and more like a Skyline, evidently. But the career criminal he was looking for might have stolen it, so it paid to check, just in case. He handed back my license, wished me well, and I drove the Sora all of 10 metres up the road into my driveway. People give the police a hard time, but I have no problem with them whatsoever, especially when I see them doing checks to catch people being unsafe on the roads. And if that happens to be a quick look at my license, then so be it. I can count the times this has happened to me on one hand, and still have enough fingers to flash the peace sign. From now on, though, I best be careful. If I look like a dangerous criminal and drive a vehicle very similar to the criminal class of this town, then it's only a matter of time before I go shopping, only to find the riot squad armed with heavy weapons surrounding me on the way back to the car park. Chapter 6. Hands behind your head and exit the vehicle slowly. Chapter 7. Munch Munch, Jungle for Lunch. Up until this weekend, I had but one whippersnipper, aka line trimmer. It was fairly cheap, electric, took most of the day to charge up, lasted all of about 4.5 seconds when you finally had it powered up, and instead of cutting grass, it sort of depressed them with its inadequacy to do anything. And somehow that made every second blade of grass slightly lean over in possibly more humour than actual fear. Thankfully, my wife spotted the bargain of the century in the local Facebook buy, swap and sell pages. Yeah, something I want in there, that's a rarity. And a short trip combined with $20 later netted us Grass-Burning Fury 2000. That's its Japanese name. A petrol-powered whippersnipper that talks the talk, walks the walk and spins death at 20,000 RPM. Actually, its real name is Ryobi Grass Scorpion. The scorpion refers to the soul of one very angry giant scorpion imbued in this instrument of death. And the one I picked up on the weekend looked like it had spent most of its life in Satan's spare oil barrel. It was that drenched in both oil and grime at its unholy union, oily grime. The previous owner seemed like a nice chap, and he was more than happy to fire it up for me before I handed over my 20. A tip for new players, always get them to do this when buying a second-hand trimmer, just in case they're trying to flog off a dud. On the third chord pull, it roared to life, and I swear the ground shook, almost knocking over the rest of the garage sale. Brilliant! Now, I must have the Lost in a Black Hole of Death prototype on my hands, as this one seems to be fueled with a ratio of 25:1:1. That's 25 parts methanol racing fuel, 1 barrel of Croatian crude oil, and 1 wayward serial killer soul. Every time you hit the primer button, an orphanage catches alight, and after 8 burning buildings, you can pull the cord to flood the engine with a great torrent of unbridled hatred. From there, the wrestling match begins, as you fight for both control of your garden and your very soul. While it sounds like you're risking your life going heave-ho with this bastard son of a mechanized demon, it does its job like nothing else and hacks into grass like a frenzied samurai. Now, with the original Grass Scorpion, they suggest wearing safety goggles. With this demon-imbued Grass Despiser, nothing short of heavily plated SWAT armor should suffice to avoid impalement by blades of anything and everything it flings back at you. Oh, and a spare priest on hand to read last rites probably wouldn't hurt either. Seriously, grass goes absolutely everywhere when this thing plows into an overgrown weed patch, and because the grass was slightly damp when I snipped it, I got drenched in a tsunami of liquid so green it'd get Kermit the Frog excited. Did I mention that it smokes? I'm not sure if it's old fuel in the block, a few seals on their way out, or perhaps remnants of the section of ozone layer I burnt through trying to turn it over, but when it's in full swing, it puffs like a locomotive having a rough afternoon. If I was in the Sioux Indian Nation, I'd probably have started World War III with all the signals that I was sending out. Still, I can't complain in the slightest for the price nor the quality of my latest purchase. Top brand, works well, bargain priced, and suddenly all the feral cats in the neighbourhood have mysteriously disappeared. Now, who needs their garden trimmed? Chapter 8. I'm a detective, ask me nothing. Chat last week in the studio led to the time-honoured tradition of reunions. No, not family reunions where your uncle gets drunk and tries to hit on the catering staff or anything that moves, more or less, but high school reunions 10 years down the track, where people are a little older, well, 10 years, a little wiser, hopefully, a hell of a lot more entertaining, and ultimately by the end of the night completely smashed, remembering the good times. Well, that was the plan originally. Actually, the plan I gave myself while on the drive down to the pub in Richmond where my 10-year shindig was hosted was to see if I could find the biggest turnaround in 10 years. I wanted to find the quiet, unassuming nerd at the front of the class that was now a highly coveted professional porn star taking on entire footy teams in one hit. I wanted to meet the kid who spoke 2 words the entire year, who had done an incredible 180-degree turn and was now a professional speaker and motivation coach around the world. And those psychopathic gothic kids who loved fire and car crashes? I was hoping they were now well-rounded members of the local community and possibly even members of their local church. Yes, I know, I have huge expectations here, but I'm a guy that well and truly loves a big surprise. 20 minutes later, after I'd parked my car in a dark alley, away from possible drunks or former students who still held a grudge, drink in hand and rudimentary greetings to everyone whose name I remembered, I really started to wonder why I came down here in the first place. My excitement level that started at 10 was fading rapidly as the night progressed, and the following happened in no particular order. The girls I had a crush on during high school never showed. I was hoping. My ex-girlfriends failed to show as well, meaning they couldn't look at what they were now missing out on. Yeah, right. More than 50% of the people I chatted to worked in a boring office and hated it, which is understandable. But when you spend the majority of your 10-year reunion complaining about it, well, maybe it's time to try a new career. Most of them had kids and lots of kid stories, which is awesome if you have kids. Not so much if you don't. My mates and I didn't at the time. Happily now, most of us do. One of the more interesting people in the room was now a detective, all right. Except they wouldn't share any interesting stories at all. I was hoping for gritty gumshoe tales in grimy back alleys in the rain with cheap smokes, hot dames and 38 specials. I got 4/5 of nothing, as she flat out refused to chat about the inner workings of her career, to the point where I was wondering if she was actually pretending to be a detective and really worked in an office somewhere, and obviously hated it. Tell me about...
No.
Right. But what about...
Look, I've just spotted some of my friends and I'm going to talk to them.
Sure, but just quick...
No.
Right. The second most interesting person in the room was the girl who sliced off cancerous growths at the local hospital. This was definitely not one of the conversations that included the words, "Awesome, let me buy you a drink so you can tell me more." And thankfully she didn't bring any of her work with her to show off to former classmates. The two guys a lot of the years suspected were actually seeing each other during high school confirmed that they were both church practitioners with their own parish, complete with wives, kids, and everything else. They still could be secret lovers for all I know, but if so, they didn't reveal that during the "What are you up to now" chats. No class psychopaths turned up. You know, the kids who were quite happy stabbing the tables with the sharp end of a compass daily, grunting at passerbys in the back corner of the science lab, or playing with a lighter constantly without using it to light up smokes at the back of the school oval. While they may have added a dash more excitement to what was shaping up to be a quite dull get-together, it also meant nobody ended up catching a ride to the local emergency department if the wrong things were said. So in all honesty, this was probably a good thing. Everyone I wanted to keep in contact with, well, I was already in contact with. And after reconnecting with people I used to annoy in classrooms on a weekly basis, there wasn't anyone there that I thought, oh God, why did we ever lose touch? Perhaps if people had done a few more 180 turns, like I'd hoped they did in the game I devised on the drive down, but even then. The cold beer was crap. Maybe it had been 10 years since the taps had been cleaned out. Yes, we serve beer just as you remember drinking it when sneaking out of class early during year 12. Boredom kicked in ridiculously quick. And after the fifth conversation starting with, "I work in an office and I hate it," 4 lukewarm beers and a conversation about hospital slices, religion, and nothing to eat, a friend and I walked across the road to the pizza place and proceeded to stay there the entire night. The pizza was salty, the beer was crisp, and the conversation was rockin'. No detectives, photocopier stories, or class psychopaths needed. So, were we all older? Yes. Wiser? Probably. Boring? Mind-numbingly so. If you're expecting fireworks and torrents of awesome memories when you walk into your 10-year school reunion, forget it. Grab a 6-pack of beer and stalk people on Facebook instead. Not only is it more cost-effective, but you'll find out everything you need to know in an amazingly shorter time, without having a need to devise a boredom-killing game on the drive down. Plus, you'll never find out what they do with cancerous growths once they've been removed from a patient, which is a win-win situation for everyone, really. Chapter 9. A buck for the sex dice. Well, it was a sound plan. Go through the house and clear out a whole ton of stuff. Sell the said ton from the comfort of our own carport one weekend and make a massive stack of fat loot. Yes, actually hold a garage sale of our own this time and make lots of coin instead of visiting everyone else's and buying crap we don't need, which is a favourite pastime of mine. Just ask my ever-filling garage. Sound in theory, rubbish in reality. The gods of garage sales really rolled snake eyes on this one. Firstly, we managed to pick the one and only day it rained in Bendigo in the last month or so. Yep, the one morning that it wasn't packed with blazing sunshine and we were huddling under the carport attempting to keep our goods dry. We'd spent 2 weeks in preparation, including sourcing and pricing our combined stuff, as well as arguing when to hold the sale. When we finally committed to a day, it was the same day the heavens opened up and bucketed down. Luckily, my homemade sign taped to the side of a council bin seemed to do the trick, as well as a couple of quick posts on Facebook. We didn't pay for any advertising to maximise our profit, you see. As we were barely into our first coffee when the bargain hunters arrived in small dribs and drabs. And it wasn't long before the strange questions and statements arrived as well. "Oh, I don't actually need any roofing screws, but you never know." He still didn't buy them. "Good day for a garage sale, mate," pointing sarcastically at the sky. In return, I pointed out that he was here at said garage sale, so the point went to me. He didn't buy anything either, though. "Old VHS stuff, I love it." Then he wandered off, mumbling to himself. Didn't buy anything. "Does it come with a remote?" But of course, that's why my wife wrote "no remote" on the tag, simply to be amusing. Oh, bless her and her comedic ways. "You got any mowers?" Yes, you're in luck, my good friend. They're all cunningly concealed behind the pile of cheap and nasty sci-fi books, and we only reveal them to people who use the code words "got any mowers." My personal favourite was the guy who pointed out that $20 for the father-in-law's ancient welder was too cheap, and we should set the price to $50. He didn't buy it at $20 either, content with the 4 that he had at home apparently. So when the next guy asked how much for it, $30 was the new answer. "Oh, great price, but it's too heavy for me to take to Tasmania." My head was really starting to hurt now with all the incredible questions we were getting. While this was happening, there was some serious negotiation going on via social media, as my wife and in-laws were wheeling and dealing on Facebook, getting screwed down to not much profit, and then waiting for people who never actually showed. One guy asked me a million questions about the computer hard drives I had on offer, screwed me down to a very low price, and then didn't actually buy anything. "Do I have any VGA cables though?" "No, go away." People came, people saw, people walked out empty-handed. One old lady muttered about everything being pricey as she shambled out, but we thought 50 cents for the unauthorised biography of Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones was actually quite a bargain. Early into the afternoon, both the weather and the small trickle of customers had dried up. I amused myself by explaining to all the bored family members in attendance what everything on the sister-in-law's table did, including the still unopened sex dice she got from a hen's night. Apparently, you roll one for the body parts and the other for the action, and off you go. Although exactly how you manage to do anything when nipple plus ass rolls up is anyone's guess. No one also bought the penis chocolate molds, which is a shame because that too was just for a measly buck for chocolate penis-related hen's night hilarity. We pulled the pin at 4 p.m. We started at roughly 8 in the morning, with a measly $60 and roughly 3 tons of junk left. Disappointingly, someone suggested trying it again the next day at a different location, the in-laws' place. And after a day of sitting around comparing idiot questions again, that too netted us $60 in very loose change. The in-laws want to try it again in a couple of weeks, which means I have from now until then to make myself very busy that day. God, there goes my dream of raking in the thousands. Way too much farting around for not much return whatsoever. Still, it wasn't a total loss of a weekend. I mean, these dice do look interesting. Chapter 10. Buried treasure in my own backyard. Move over, Lara Croft, and make way for yours truly, Backyard Raider. A buried chest full of golden doubloons, a secret fallout shelter, massive amounts of lost coins, Jimmy Hoffa. What exactly would I find with a $30 secondhand basic garden type metal detector in my own backyard? Well, there was only one way to find out. It was just another high-octane, danger-filled day at work full of exciting forms to fill out and work-experienced kids who failed to show up. While I was busy draining the company out of another teaspoon of delicious instant coffee, my wife dropped me a message on the Almigo phone. She had found someone selling a very cheap metal detector. Now, since I hadn't even come close to finishing off my DIY detector for many moons now, well, close to a full year, I jumped at the chance and hauled turbos to get to the seller before anyone else beat me there. Nothing moves like a motivated wannabe gold miner, and before you could say, does it even work? I was at the guy's front door with some hard-earned ready to burn. "So, have you found anything of value?" I asked. "Just my wife's lost ring over there," he replied, pointing at the nearby bushland. Well, that was enough for me. I could just picture myself digging up enough lost wedding rings to give my retirement fund a full flagpole. The supermarket was next for some AA batteries, and before you knew it, I was knee-deep in the jungle I lovingly call my backyard. While my lovely wife tried every button and proclaimed, "Bloody hell, this looks complicated," I limbered up, said a prayer to the god of couch cushions and lost coins, and got to work. After 10 minutes and 3/4 of the yard down, my new favourite toy started to make the noise I wanted to hear. Something. God only knows what was buried in the middle of the garden, but I was like a kid at Christmas now, that the mighty coin collector may have suddenly paid itself off with the first thing it detected. I grabbed a nearby shovel and started digging with mad abandon until I hit something solid. "Hope it's not a pipe," my wife uttered. "Not a pipe," I grunted as I started to unearth a bigger hole. "Really hope it's not a pipe," she continued as I waved my new fortune finder around to get a better fix. Bless her, she does worry about her lunatic husband sometimes. Whatever it was bigger than I was expecting and took some time to get around. Finally, I got underneath whatever it was and brought it up to daylight. "Behold, Captain America's very first shield," I exclaimed as I held up a very rusty circular object. Looks like the lid to a 44-gallon drum, the better half chortled before she walked inside to escape the mad ramblings of a slightly disappointed treasure hunter. Still, I couldn't fault the detector as this bit of drum history was at least a foot down under some very, very boring dirt. Sadly, aside from the metal part to an old paintbrush, that's all it found in a very comprehensive sweep of the backyard. But at least I do know that it worked. And when the prices of rusted 44-gallon drums go up, I am set. So after all that, anyone want me to come around and help you find your lost drums? Chapter 11. You don't have to be insane, but it helps. In my more than 20 years in the radio industry, I've met and worked with some truly amazing, inspirational, and wonderfully talented and entertaining people, many of which have become great friends of mine. However, this chapter is not dedicated to them. No, this time I'm throwing up a mock salute and paying tribute to the complete nutters I met along the way that made my time in the radio game more than hilariously entertaining for all the wrong reasons. The people who at the time blazed in like a bushfire, brought in too much lunacy to an already slightly deranged office, and then spun off like a tornado, leaving everyone in their wake wondering what the hell just happened. Shine on, you crazy diamonds. Just a quick note, nicknames have been changed to prevent me from getting sued for honest recollections. Introducing Biscuits. Hailing from parts unknown, Biscuits had impeccable timing, managing to roll up to the station mere hours after we said goodbye to another announcer off to the UK. Figuring he'd save a lot of time having to advertise the position, the boss hired him on the spot without really checking his credentials, which in hindsight would have saved us a lot of trouble down the road. And Biscuits started the next day. The trouble is, we couldn't really figure out what to do with him. Originally, they made him an assistant copywriter to help me write commercial scripts for our local production department. But it was after a couple of scripts we discovered he couldn't spell very well. I had to explain to the lovely office girls that his email asking for a dairy wasn't a request for some cows to milk, he meant a work diary. But they did run with my suggestion of buying him a couple of toy cows and a dairy to be amusing. So that was fun. So they got Biscuits to focus on his on-air work instead, which he did, with an almost zealot-like intensity, to the point where he would record up his shift for the day and then sit in the studio for up to 6 hours, watching it like a hawk to make sure that the automated computer played every last song, commercial and voice bit, even though it was designed to run just fine by itself. It took us weeks to convince him that the machine would fail on average about once a year, and alarms would go off when it did to alert us to the fact, and the station would not implode if he went off to do something else and left the computer to its own devices. Eventually, he complied and got on with the rest of the jobs we gave him. If only he remembered to take his phone with him. Every day, Biscuits would leave his phone in the studio for the next hapless announcer to discover, usually when it went off from a message or a phone call right in the middle of a shift. Turn on the microphone, his phone would get a message and beep very loudly. Do something funny on air and the thing would start to ring right in the middle of it. No matter how many times you reminded him to take his phone, it'd appear back in the studio and go off when you least expect it. After one particular frustrating morning working in the studio with it receiving messages and making noise constantly, I decided to change all the staff contacts in the phone to names of various famous old wrestlers. According to his phone, I was now known as Hulk Hogan. Brett from the production department was now Jake the Snake, And if he needed any technical assistance, well, he'd have to call through to the Ultimate Warrior. This led to an amazingly amusing voicemail message that afternoon from Biscuits, blasting me and asking what would happen if there was an emergency and he didn't realise my new name was now Hulk Hogan. I'm also happy to report that I was working with a very sympathetic boss at the time who secretly found the whole saga very humorous and pretended to chastise me in front of Biscuits for playing with his phone. Now, if this was the worst of it, you could really look past these minor issues and get on with life. But running out of things that he could mess up, someone put him on weekend work, and things really started to drift downhill at a record pace. Biscuits seemed to love women so much, he'd spend most of the weekend at work looking at them. And the more naked and the more compromising positions, the better. He also didn't discriminate on whose computer he looked at doing this, and there'd be quite a few Mondays where a quick search of your PC's internet history would net some truly interesting results. Guess who had no idea how to hide a browser history? Of course, what does a guy all by himself usually end up doing while viewing such pictures? He lets off steam, of course. We found this out too one day when the production team found his, tissue-looking steam catcher. Biscuits didn't last much longer at the station after that. We also found out a few months later after he left the building that he wasn't made redundant from his last position. He was fired over some unwanted advances on other staff members. Remember, kids, make a call, check someone's history, save yourself lots of hassle, and never trust a man who doesn't know who Hulk Hogan is. Introducing the Captain. Now, if you're imagining someone working at a radio station who arrived at work by boat, or at the very least in some kind of nautical outfit, I'm sorry to say that the captain wasn't that kind of captain. By day, the captain was a radio station sales representative who sold advertising space. By the weekend, he was the captain of the local footy team. And by Saturday night, he was the captain of the closed fist clash cartage catch-up. From memory, he also studied or was a former nutritionalist, but that has no bearing on why he was so memorable. Being the leading man in the local football team meant that he was also public enemy number one for any visiting players from other teams, who had more than a bellyful of the pub's finest and were looking for someone to punch out for the hell of it. So he got punches thrown at him a lot. And being the size of a medium-sized family car, with a fondness for buckets of cider, he was more than happy to play the hated enemy, provided he could hand back plenty of receipts with his fists. The captain gave as good as he got. And more, he was a generous guy. And it was a common scene to see him showing off his incredible bruise and welt collection on a Monday morning at work. Bruises the general manager put down to a bit of rough play on the football oval. However, if the GM had been drinking at the town's one and only nightclub over the weekend, he may have seen a great display of team effort. Namely, a bunch of opposite team members attempting to punch the captain and getting knocked on their ass for the privilege. I remember one particular night at the club where he got pushed over in the middle of the dance floor by a couple of visiting players. He sat there for a second, flashed a grin that would scare the hardiest of sharks, and then unleashed like a steel spring on the nearest unfortunate. That night, it would have been a busy night for the doctors applying stitches at the local emergency department. One morning, he lifted up his shirt sleeve to display a set of angry teeth marks deeply embedded in his bicep. "That's from a drunk shearer talking shit," he grunted before walking off. I wondered what the shearer looked like after all was said and done. It must have been one hell of a skull-crushing headlock that the captain applied. One Sunday, when I arrived in the studio, there was a message on the station phone system. Once again, while out, the captain had run afoul of someone he didn't like. Words were spoken, fists were thrown, his phone got knocked, and pocket-dialed the radio station. For the next 10 minutes, the message played back some incredibly realistic wild animal grunts, coupled with bone-jarring crunches, and some super colourful boasts about death and dismemberment from the captain himself. I deleted it shortly after. After playing it to a few mates, of course, this is me we're talking about, to keep the illusion that any and all injuries the captain sustained over the weekend must have been strictly related to his time on the football oval. I'm not sure what happened to the captain next as I moved stations and lost track of him. I can only guess he's out there, somewhere, kicking goals and just as many teeth in, and hiding all the evidence under a shirt and tie during office hours. Introducing Fishboy. Now, one big unwritten rule of radio is that if you make a mistake on air, don't bring attention to it, and pray that management doesn't hear it. It's also one of the first things I learnt in radio school. The theory being that if you don't draw attention to your on-air mess-up, 5 minutes later your audience will have forgotten it ever happened. However, this did not save poor Fishboy. who ended up having a pretty roller coaster-like career in radio that lasted as long as a typical ride on a roller coaster. He started off on work experience at one of the stations, then full-time work, then ended up pulling very early morning duties, and after one particular morning, found himself at the end of the unemployment queue. And the reason why this happened has ended up in quite a few people's collection of radio blooper MP3s. While getting things ready for the weekly rural news show at a time when most of the non-farming community is still asleep, putting in the weather, loading in the grain reports, trying not to fall asleep during the exhilarating reports from the local sheep and beef markets, etc., Fishboy opened up a link someone sent him via email and thought he'd discovered the funniest thing since Married with Children was on television. It was a video clip of a novelty-mounted singing fish, only when someone pressed the red button underneath it, the song it sang was not the usual novelty singing fish song. Instead, it was an overdubbed track of how the fish was stupid. And the people who bought it were stupid. Everything was stupid, really. And there was enough F words and C words in there, emphasising the point to make the roughest of sailors quiet down. Now, figuring he may share this funny song with a few other staff members when they arrived at work, Fishboy dubbed the song into the system, accidentally into a spot that was conveniently left open on the computer. Sadly for him, it was the same spot where the pre-recorded weather from the morning show should have gone. So you can just imagine the surprise for many a local farmer at 6 o'clock in the morning when they tuned in to see if any storms were coming, only to get this instead. The country roundup weather for Smith Street Farm Supplies. Everything needed for the man on the land. Then 3 seconds of weather music played, and then, I'm a fish and I'm not funny. I'm bought by stupid with too much money. Why don't they all off? Why don't they all off? Oh, I'm a fish and I'm not funny. I'm bought by stupid. Followed by a quick music sting, and then, good morning, I'm Rob and welcome to Country Roundup. Today we speak to... It didn't really help that one of the radio station owners was usually up at that time and rarely missed an episode of one of his favourite shows, Country Roundup. The general manager of the station called up the program manager of the station to go in there, take away Fishboy's work keys, and march him out of the building. Fishboy's illustrious radio career was over in the space of a weather update. Introducing the Fox. And finally, we get to the Fox. And if looks can be deceiving, then she had the station well and truly fooled for at least 2 weeks. Maybe 2.5 at a stretch. She was employed by our enthusiastic general manager, who artificially gave her the Fox nickname, as a receptionist and traffic manager. Not with actual roads. In radio, the traffic department deals with scheduling commercials. Since there are a lot of commercials each and every day, it can be quite a hectic and stressful job. The Fox came into work each day with a smile and a shrieking voice that could melt office phone lines. Something she attempted to do at least 3 times every day when trying to track down a particular staff member. Now, if there was no answer when she dialed your phone extension, rather than explain to whoever called that you were out of the office, she would then ring someone else's extension and shriek at them loudly, asking where you were, and then continue to do the same to every extension in the building until you were either tracked down or the day ran out of spare hours. So the Fox dials my extension. No answer. The Fox then dials the production studio. Is Al there? No, he's probably gone to lunch. The Fox then dials the on-air studio. Is Al there? No, he's gone to the shops for lunch. He'll be back in half an hour. The Fox then dials the cleaner. Is Al there? No, he died last week in a terrible dump truck accident. His funeral is tomorrow. The Fox then dials directory assistants. Is Al there? Wash, rinse, repeat. Other fun memories of the Fox included asking the on-air team to put out a lost and found notice for her puppy Rana, who had "runned away," the breakfast announcer joked at the time. Apparently, after 2 weeks' ownership of this brand new addition to the shared house, she figured Rana would be more than capable of staying put, even with the back door wide open throughout the day, in a house that had no fences. There was also the night when she gave her housemate a photo of her to take clubbing, in the hope she would bring back a bloke for the Fox for the night, rather than getting all dressed up and attempting to pull one herself. And then, of course, there was the time when it was suggested that resigning was definitely in her best interest. After weeks of messing up the station logs, the wrong commercials played, the wrong number of commercials played, many commercials never got played, clients started asking questions, the sales reps had no idea what was happening with their campaigns. Yeah, it got pretty messy. Thankfully, she did take the hint, and a day after she left, the office casual found a decent stack of order forms under her keyboard. It turns out that if she didn't understand a particular booking, rather than asking anyone any questions, she popped them under her keyboard and, I guess, hoped it went away. I never found out the official tally, but apparently the confusing orders that never went any further than under her keyboard ended up costing thousands. That's thousands of dollars of on-air time that never actually ended up on air, which meant the same amount of airtime and more had to be given away as make goods. In radio stations where there's a finite amount of on-air space every day, there was a lot of work involved in patching up the damage caused by the fox. Oh, and we never found out if Rana ever came back. The fox is probably out there right now on a different industry office intercom system, shrieking around, asking if anyone has seen him. So just a quick note about this chapter, chapter 12, the annual meeting of the companies that fleece me. Now, originally when I wrote this chapter back in 2017, I had no idea that flash forward to now, I'd be turning this into an audiobook here on YouTube. And considering it was written as a performance type of script with at least 6 characters on board, and it's just me reading things out loud here, well, any attempt by me to voice 6 separate characters in one piece is just going to sound something awful, so I've chosen not to do that. However, if you are keen to read this mini play about the companies that gather around a boardroom table discussing how they're planning in their eccentric billionaire ways to take every last cent of each and every paycheck I've ever made, well, I've included a link to the book in the comments section below, where it was originally printed. So while you're checking that out, let's continue with this. Chapter 13. The snakes are fake, but the acting is worse. Holy hell, it's truly awful movie review time. And this time it's like an uppercut to the face combined with a drop kick to the knee at exactly the same time. So much pain coming from all directions. Fake Americans, CGI snakes, and an Aboriginal curse from someone who isn't? Snakes on a plane too? No, sorry, this is the terrible Australian movie known quite simply as Prey. It hurts my head trying to recall exactly how far off the rails, train station, and even public toilet block this travesty of a film ended up, so bear with me here. I'd also like to thank my lovely wife Donna for choosing this one on the strength of Natalie Bassingthwaighte being on the front cover. Never again, love. Making a total of about $300 on opening weekend, Prey involves a group of instantly forgettable rabble deciding that it's a good idea to go for a surf. The only problem is, it seems that the decent surf is a bajillion million miles away, and why they didn't find a closer place for fun at the beach is anyone's guess. That doesn't seem to bother our amateur acting class, who pile into the four-wheel drives and into outback hell in that order. It also doesn't explain why there's a few people pretending to be American in this Australian film, set in the Australian outback. Like Natalie Bassingthwaighte, who last check is Australian and usually sounds fairly Australian when not having to pretend to be an American. Like in this film, which was set and filmed here in Australia, just in case you missed that bit. Do international audiences struggle to make out what's being said with an Aussie accent? I mean, can you understand what I'm saying now? Team Forgettable drive to the middle of nowhere and thanks to some raving lunatic and his overpriced maps, decide to find a local waterhole to have a dip in. Now their definition of nearby must be different to yours, mine and the rest of the saner parts of the world, as they end up driving hundreds of kilometres and not coming anywhere near it. Instead, they end up in the 9th level of hell, the remotest outback this side of Remote Town, part of Remote City, which incredibly was actually filmed in a warehouse for budget reasons, and end up in a Groundhog Day-like nightmare. Oh, and one by one they die, thanks to the lunatic map seller and his love of CGI snakes. I almost forgot that part, like most of this movie. So it's up to our pregnant pseudo-American and her let's discover my sexuality while I'm going through hell and all my friends are dying around me and surprised now I'm a lesbian lawyer friend to get the hell out of Didgeridodge. The story then goes nowhere at lightning speed and takes a complete nosedive headfirst into ground glass when it's revealed that the reason this bloke who isn't Aboriginal, you won't actually see anyone at all who's actually Aboriginal in this film, who uses what appears to be an Aboriginal curse, is killing them all because Natalie's brother accidentally ran over his woman 20 years ago. Fair enough, I reckon, but it's also revealed that he already killed her brother and his best mate back in the day anyway, so in this film he's really just getting greedy, taking more lives. It also doesn't explain why he can control snakes, turn people into zombies, or why his wife is undead, but like the hidden lesbian thing, nothing really makes sense in this movie. Watching Prey, the movie, is like waking up and discovering you're the victim of sex change surgery by a drunken trainee mechanic. So many bits that don't make any sense, and you really do wonder if you're ever going to get your life back after it's over. You know you're onto an absolute winner when the producers try to tell you that it's a semi-comedy, and there isn't a single moment worth even a choked chortle in its entirety. Well, aside from the hilariously bad CGI snake, that is, but you'll be giggling for all the wrong reasons. Prey the movie? -0 stars. Chapter 14. Cruising in the Lexingtons. Now, maybe it's just me, but on the rare occasion when I'm sick enough to visit a professional physician, I assume they actually know about medicine and all the crazy biology stuff that makes me tick. Likewise, when I take my dog to the vet, I'm hoping the vet doesn't ask, "Well, what's that thing then?" while pointing to my border collie Savannah up on the bench. So, when I walked into an auto parts store this morning, I figured everyone in there actually knew a little something about car brands. I guess not. For the 278th time this month, one of the bulb holders in the rear tail light of my Lexus died of rust poisoning. A pretty common problem for this particular model, and it's a pretty easy fix provided you have the time, energy, and a basic understanding of wiring. Okay, it's actually a Toyota Sora, but in certain parts of the world it's also known as a Lexus SC300. And I quite enjoy telling people that I drive a Lexus, as they automatically think that it's something hideously expensive and not the two-door bronzy thing parked out the front that's falling to pieces on the inside. So I walked into the parts store looking for a bayonet brake light bulb holder. Usually an easy task, but this time around they'd hidden them behind the counter for some reason. When checking out the section where you'd usually find them, next to the bulbs that go into them is usually a good place, a questioning sales guy suddenly appeared.
Can I help you?
Yeah, I'm looking for a bayonet-style brake light bulb holder. He looked at me like I'd just dropped a fairly noxious fart in the middle of the store.
For what kind of car?
It's a Lexus. His bewildered look suddenly changed to one that looked like I just dropped my strides and proceeded to lay a big turd from one side of the store to the other while humming a happy tune. It's also a Toyota model, if that helps. He mumbled something about computers and moved to the counter where he proceeded to hit random keys on the keyboard in the vain hope that the store computer would translate my obviously fever-clad ramblings. After a few moments of trying to locate the any key, he called over a co-worker.
This guy's looking for a part for, what'd you say it was, mate? A Lexingtons?
Look, I know it's school holiday time in this country, but this guy looked way too old to be a work experience kid. How can you work at an auto parts store and have never heard of the brand Lexus? Have you never, ever seen the Lexus badge on anything? And exactly, how do you get the word Lexingtons from the word Lexus? Obviously, for this parts store, it's far easier to find parts for a car that went out of production back in 1927. I looked it up. Apparently, there was a brand called Lexington. Than it is to source spare bits for a car that came out the same year Boris Yeltsin became president. That's the year 1991 for those counting at home. I suddenly had images in my head of really ancient drivers with those wispy beards coming in asking for a 5-pound tin of processed corn syrup to hand crank through their Lexington to get to church and back on a Sunday. "You want parts for a Japanese car, you say, Governor? Why, are they making cars now?" I must have missed the time warp near the automatic doors when I walked in. Thankfully, someone who knew what a bulb holder was and what cars were, ultimately, found me a generic part that would fit just fine. Hopefully, too, when I left, they also gave the first sales guy a car magazine and circled that big L symbol on the nearest Lexus. The good news is that if somehow I do inherit a Lexington's from 1927, I know where to go if the brake lights suddenly fail, or if I need a 5-pound tin of corn syrup for anything, really. Chapter 15. Hanging up the shorts. So, today, I've announced my retirement from the game of professional basketball. Trust me, it's probably safer for everyone this way. It started off with an email at work. In amongst press releases for the endangered helmeted honey-eater bird, offers to extend my manhood to biblical proportions, and pictures of amusing cats, a colleague who also coaches the local professional basketball team emailed me with a request for my t-shirt size. Naturally, I took this as one of my clients wants to give you a free t-shirt for reasons known only to them. And while I never usually pass on a free item of clothing, even the bad ones make good rags for cleaning the car, it had piqued my interest. So I replied back with a simple, what for? Well, it turned out that halftime in this weekend's professional basketball game, there would be a short 10-minute charity game of basketball. involving some local celebrities and business people. And someone in their wisdom figured that I would make an exceptional player in said game, somehow. Obviously, they'd never seen me play before, otherwise they'd realise that hoping I'd do well as a baller was the equivalent of hoping your local tyre fitter could publish an amazing book of erotic poetry. Still, we were doing it for the kids' ward at the local hospital, and even someone as unsporting as I couldn't argue with the fact that even if I made a right hash of it, the money would still go to the kids. So I signed the indemnity form and cast my mind back to the last time I ever shot some hoops. It was back in April 1996. Yeah, the last time I ever attempted to follow my hoop dreams was over 20 years ago at high school. Obviously, I'd really followed on from there with a couple of games of NBA Jam, but my knowledge of the great game was up there with my expertise in advanced physics, geology, and complex anesthesiology. I'm also sure the words triple header came from porn and not basketball, which would make my foray onto the court mildly amusing at best. Additionally, my track record for charity games of sport is also nothing to crow about. I played mixed netball once, and a woman who had dwarfed my car threatened to crush me for some reason that I can't recall. Then there was a charity game of football where I punted nothing but air and bounced off about 85 kilos of unforgiving steel, known as famous football player Matthew Knights. My understanding wife had offered to coach me, having played a lot more b-ball than I had. But figuring that I wouldn't even get a touch, I rejected her offer and decided to throw caution, and on the night, the ball, to the wind. Of course, being a charity game, and me being the ultimate sporting charity case, I also had to find some sponsorship money to help out the hospital. It was just $50 entry, but since we're not too good at math on our breakfast radio show, my co-host and I somehow managed to find 3 businesses more than happy to get behind me at $100 a pop. So, massive thanks goes to Brent from Brent A. Munro Floor Sanding, who we'd also found out was a gun croquet player, Arj from the Human Mechanics Bendigo, and the team behind Regional Roof Restorations for agreeing to front up the cash. I also enjoyed the delicious irony of having Human Mechanics on board sponsoring me, as their tagline is, "We build athletes," and I'm obviously the clay before they even get started. However, $300 before I even bounced the ball, that was a brilliant start. The day before the big game, I caught up with a fellow charity team member who confessed that he was okay at shooting, but terrible at dribbling. That made me feel marginally better because I was terrible at pretty much everything. But as long as I didn't fall flat on my bum on the night and bleed everywhere, it should be fun. Before I knew it, it was just about game time, and I found myself in the referee's change room in my slam dunk best. A pair of elbow coverings that would have been better suited for a jobber in World Wrestling Entertainment, a pair of odd socks, pinstripe shorts better suited for the golf course, and a sponsorship t-shirt that was 2 sizes too big. So much for asking for my t-shirt size on the email there, coach. Everyone else turned up in basketball boots. I rolled up in a pair of cross-training Nikes that really needed a bath. Yeah, I looked amazing as I ran onto the court and instantly realised I had no idea what I was doing. The game kicked off and I ran as fast as I could somewhere where the ball wouldn't be. Quickly backtracking, I suddenly found myself at the wrong end and wondering why time had suddenly stood still. Someone scored and I almost cheered, before realising it was the other team. Closer to the action now, I suddenly ended up with the ball, and fearing that it would explode, I quickly threw it back. However, it still managed to get back to me and I took a shot missing both anything and everything. Game going well, as expected. A couple more points for the opposition now, and amazingly, I kept getting the ball. Unluckily, my guarding skills were as strong as wet cardboard, so it was pretty easy to take the ball off me. My endurance had also run out to the nearest bar after 2 minutes, and I was wheezing like a Mitsubishi Magna with 1,000,000 miles on the clock. I was as fit as a slab of concrete. The ball kept coming, and I kept missing at both scoring and shooting. Fearing a possible riot, the mascots got involved. And suddenly, I found myself in a matchup against the mascot Indian Brave, which was completely unexpected. I also almost accidentally clotheslined Minnie Mouse, who I discovered was somehow involved in this game, and not a hallucination from physical exertion. In the dying seconds, someone passed me the ball again. Why did that seem like a good idea now? And I heard my name announced as I took the shot and flummoxed it completely. Trying to wrest the ball back off the opposition also scored me a foul. As from the sidelines, it probably looked like I was trying to lock the guy into a Fujiwara armbar wrestling hold. I probably was. I've seen a lot more wrestling than basketball. Thankfully, the siren sounded and the game was over before I fell into a screaming heap. We put up an interesting fight, but lost, with the final score 7-2. Oh well. I managed to score $300 to help the kids though. I entertained some real basketballers with my general ineptitude, and I proved to my wife how god-awful I was at sports when I rolled into the house 20 minutes later, still struggling to speak. To my team, I thank you for being part of it as much as you're probably thanking me for making you look really good in comparison. Thanks to all the fans who have followed my incredible career for all of 10 minutes. And a general thank you to the game of basketball for letting me grace your courts for one last time. It is time to go, Al. Time to call it a day. The torch has been passed, and with me stepping down, it gives some lucky kid the chance to shine. Take the opportunity, son. Go for gold. I'm not hanging up the boots. I'm burning them. As I said at the start of this piece, it's probably safer for everyone that way. Chapter 16. Lock the door. Here come the undead. Now, let me start this by saying that I wasn't A, drunk, B, hallucinating, or C, on any decent strength flu medication when this event happened. It also had nothing to do with this town's recent Youth Week activities, nor Halloween, nor any kind of flash mob activity. But honestly, I swear on a stack of Vicar of Dibley episodes that what I saw was true. The other day, I drove past a pair of real-life hitchhiking zombies. I kid you not. His face looked like Frankenstein's monster's punching bag after a particularly stressful day at work, while hers would make a horrid banshee look like Elle Macpherson. And they both had that grey-skinned look of when your liver takes long service leave and decides to never come back. Okay, maybe they were just a pair of well-worn drinkers. With more than a couple of master's degrees in alcohol absorption each, they were stumbling around near the gold mines, which is a local drinking establishment after all. But in the brief moment of first seeing them and then planting the foot to set a new land speed record to get out of there, they sure looked like zombies. They shambled across the footpath like zombies. They had the glazed look and open mouth moan of a zombie. While their clothes weren't covered in gore or bits of someone else's brain, they weren't well-dressed zombies. If I had the windows down, I'm sure they'd both smell like something had died. Horribly. And when he, incredibly slowly, like he was a zombie actually coming to think of it, put out his thumb, I was sure it was about to come flying off. As I looked in the rearview mirror while driving past them, I swear the female of the pair looked at me like I was a well-roasted leg of lamb fresh out of the oven, complete with baked potatoes and roasted pumpkin. Or maybe there was a drop of beer on her lips that she missed before, and that's what caused her to lick them all of a sudden. Now, while there was no story of the pair in the next day's news, and the journalist I worked with gave me an incredibly blank look when I asked if there was any news of people heading to emergency with human-looking bite marks overnight, I have seen enough zombie movies to know that society usually ignores any and all warning signs until it's too late. Which means it's highly likely that an outbreak of zombieism is more than likely on its way. So if anyone needs me, I'll be busy in the shed, armouring up the family car and stocking up on canned food just in case. Chapter 17. Lurching around in the lemon limo. The text message came through a couple of weeks ago. Would I be able to drive a limousine for a wedding for a few hours? It'd be a simple job around town, and the limo was ready to go when I was. In need of both adventure and cash, and not in that order, I jumped at the chance. I mean, who wouldn't want to play limo driver? Of course, after sending the reply, I suddenly recalled that I've never actually driven a limo before. I've been in a few, but never in the driver's seat, and the day would be a complete trial by fire with hopefully no trials and even less fire. These are my notes from the day. 2:20 p.m. Suited and booted, I make my way to Limo Base HQ, otherwise known as one of the local pubs around town, where I find the limousine looking longer than first imagined. Not to worry, because it was a Ford, driven one of those before, automatic, that's fine, no problem there, and about 3 times as long as my Mazda. Oh dear. Still, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. 2:25 p.m. This limousine has more mileage on it than old episodes of The Big Bang Theory. At a guess, it's gone around the clock and the world more than once. This could be interesting. 2:35 p.m. Survived a few corners and successfully missed everything while lumbering around. Limousine training going incredibly well. Pulled over to put wedding ribbon on the bonnet. While parked, I discovered the only door unlocked is mine, which could make things a touch interesting getting everyone in, unless they're happy to climb over the barricade. 2:40 p.m. Boss's text message of double tap the remote to unlock doors unhelpful, as the remote is currently out of batteries. Consider crawling through to the back area to unlock things from the inside until I notice the door lock button on the dash. After pressing it for what seems like an ice age, everything unlocks. Like the engine, the button makes a lot of noise but takes quite a while for anything to actually happen. 2:45 p.m. At bride's house now. Bride looks gorgeous and bridal party the same. Crammed the whole party into the limo. Their drinks esky took up most of the space in the middle, and the machine in kind responds by telling me in no uncertain terms through loud beeping that it's only got 60 kilometers left of range in the fuel tank. It seems to have the fuel economy of a very thirsty battleship and maneuvers just like one. 2:55 p.m. 3 kilometers later, and we're at the wedding venue. Stopped by camera team, aunts and uncles, so they can capture the bride successfully trying to ungracefully step out of the back seat. With air conditioning blaring to keep things cool, including the drinks and the driver, the limo now beeps more frantically and tells me I have somehow only got 30 kilometers left to go. I'm now afraid to press any more random buttons on the dash in case something suddenly drains the last few drops of petrol in the tank. 3:10 p.m. With everyone inside the venue, I sneak a retreat to the nearest petrol station. With the weight of this beast, climbing up the local hills feels like attempting to scale Everest. As I pull up, everyone stops and just about breaks their neck to see if anyone famous is lounging in the back. Even without the tinted windows blocking the view, sadly all they'd get to see would be a pair of shoes and a half-eaten bag of chips. They were nice shoes really, but probably not worth a selfie moment. 3:23 p.m. Sneak back to the wedding reception with hopefully enough petrol to go another short distance. Decide to switch everything off to avoid limo exploding. Relax and read a book until one of the wedding guests comes out to reload the esky full of beers in the back for the bridal party. Resist the temptation to A, look at what kind of beers they are in the esky, and B, knock off the beers myself, as tempting as it would be and as hot as it was. 3:40 p.m. Applause getting louder. Wedding must be coming to an end. Start the limo to move it forward. Nothing happens. Swear at it and thump steering wheel. Still nothing. A quick frantic call to the guy who gave me the job proposes the solution, rock the gear selector back and forth a few times like you're cranking up a generator, which amazingly works. The car obviously thought it was in a different gear than park. Roll forward and keep the car running while waiting for the bridal party. Regardless of the massive hole in the ozone layer this beast was obviously now creating, along with the buckets of fuel it was guzzling just to hold idle. 4:25 p.m. Now out of town at scenic bridge location. Car now off-road and part of the wedding photos. Probably should have hit it with a bucket of acid to dislodge the bird poo on the bonnet first. Of course, I only noticed the poo well into the photos and decide that Photoshop on the pictures later would be far easier than me holding up the photographer while dislodging some mammoth bird turds with a stick in front of the wedding party. 4:30 p.m. While photos being taken nearby, told by one of the relatives that one of the back stoplights have failed on the limo. Luckily, I find a spare on the front console. Unluckily, I can't find the Phillips head screwdriver needed to get the light cover off to change them over. Onboard toolkit only has the rod for a jack and no jack. If fined for a missing brake light by the local authorities, the bill for both the penalty and my possible therapy after this is going straight to the limousine's owner. 5 p.m. Back on the road and on the way back to the reception. One of the guests asks if I have any music. I have a fish around and the results turn out to be dire, as the only thing on board is Judy Sings 20 Party Classics, which someone obviously got for free after buying so much petrol back in 1920. Decide against the risk of discovering which party tunes Judy considered classics and stick with the radio. Discover that 3/4 of the speakers are currently working. The last quarter come and go as they please. Probably should learn to sing, or bring my own CDs for the next journey. 5:40 p.m. Final destination, the reception. Help one of the groomsmen retrieve the esky but fail to sneak out a brew for myself. Say my goodbyes and very slowly, because it doesn't do fast no matter what the situation, drive the limousine back to base HQ to remove all the empties and the half-finished bag of chips. Sadly, no wallets or cash left on the back seat. Start hearing strange noise from the driver's side front tyre and suggest to the owner that it could be a wheel bearing on the way out. He just nods and adds it to the list of future repairs. Apparently, that list is now 2 pages long. 6 p.m. Back into my Mazda. Now, obviously, someone has broken into it and added another 9 turbochargers, as it's lightning quick and stupidly agile compared to the limousine. On second thoughts, even the 100 Years' War would feel quicker than the limo, especially uphill. Swear to myself I'd never drive that terrible land barge ever again. And ended up driving it twice more for various functions before the owner sold it. What can I say? I'm a true sucker for pain sometimes. Chapter 18. Denizens on my doorstep. I feel in the new year it's time to move to a new neighbourhood. Because something obviously buried under my house is starting to attract the local ferals in droves. A few months ago, on a balmy eve, there was a rapping upon my door, and I sprung to my feet exclaiming, "Goodness, who visits this sanctuary at this hour? I sure hope they come bearing gifts." Sadly, it wasn't my stockbroker coming with good news that my shares had quadrupled in price. A tad tricky when I have neither shares nor a stockbroker currently, but instead a heavily tattooed bloke who, after 10 cans of Jim Beam, was fighting a very tough slugfest with gravity. The kind of guy you don't want to bump into on the street, let alone end up on your doorstep. He looked me in the eye and said, "Hey, is there a guy called Andy here?" "No." "Yeah, I'm looking for this blonde kid. I did time with him. I know he lives somewhere on this street." "Oh, good. Now I have a heavily tattooed drunken ex-crim on my doorstep looking for Andy, who also happened to be an ex-crim and apparently lived here, or at least in a similar-looking house to mine, after 10 cans of bourbon. After the repeated no's finally sunk in, he stumbled off to where he threw his bike on my front lawn and valiantly attempted not to plough into parked cars. Knowing my luck, he'll probably be back after the next slab. Misfit number 2, I heard 5 blocks away before she struck. The loudest banshee that has ever descended upon my neighbourhood of Golden Square, acting as a scout for her party of troublesome merrymakers. "Hey guys, I'm sure it's this house. Yeah, it's this one." Once I heard that, my heart sank. It was quickly followed up with clomp, 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 clomp on my bullet-ridden concrete steps outside, followed up with a blam, 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 as she punched the door as hard as she could, as if her life depended on it. I opened it up to find a 17-year-old, at a guess, armed with Tupperware. An armful of Tupperware containers. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why either. Probably on the way to a make-your-own-pizza party, or whatever crazy kids do to get their kicks these days. She opened her mouth, yelled the words, "Is Mary here?" And I was propelled by a massive gale force right down my own hall, destroying the bookshelf at the end of the hallway that broke my fall. After brushing off my collection of the stainless steel rat books, I yelled back, "No!" And this seemed to satisfy the loud ghoul, who trotted off to announce to everyone in the same galaxy that, "No, this isn't the house!" Finally, our most recent gift of feral attraction, and the inspiration for this chapter, occurred earlier this morning, New Year's Day. At 2 this morning, we were woken to the sounds of 2, possibly 3, I couldn't be bothered doing a head count, drunks having a deep and meaningful right outside our house. Whether they were waiting for a bus that doesn't operate at night or just decided that our place was a good location as ever to start up an hour of boozed up rambling, I'll never know. But we were treated to a lot of slurring, swearing, and random drunken gibberish. Lucky us. Thankfully, one of them decided to chase after someone or something, and they took off at full blitzed pelt, never to return. I would go outside to see if they did damage the front fence or maybe the bus stop, but I'm going to give it a day or so for any possible spew from them to harden up in the sun. Here's hoping the new year is full of people I actually want to see on my doorstep, which is mainly the lottery commission with a big fat check, and 0 drunks, banshees, or Andy looking for his long-lost mate. Oh, and by the way, Happy New Year. Chapter 19. The petrol-soaked wedding where time stood still. You stand on the groom's side. You may now kiss the bride. You smell like petrol. The first 2 you'll hear at your next wedding. The last, well, that's what you probably would have heard if you ended up on the same table as I did over the weekend. The shirt was half ironed, the tie was sharp, and the smell of cologne was just enough to hide the scent of the 8 coffees I'd had to make it to that point. Yet in the 3 minutes it took to fill up the Mazda on the way down to the wedding venue was obviously enough time for something petrol smelling to soak up into my outfit and carry in the intoxicating scent of BP Ultimate. Hey, if I'm going to wear stinking petrol, at least I'm going to wear the top stuff. Yes, indeed, I now smelt like a refinery, and a busy one at that. An open flame or lit cigarette anywhere near me, and you wouldn't be listening to this now. Luckily, I had enough on hand to amuse the rest of the table away from the super smell of my eau de petrol tanker. I stole people's bread rolls, amused them with non-working magic tricks, and swapped all the jackets on the back of the seats for an end-of-night laugh. Note for new players, if you want me to behave at weddings, give me a roll. I was master of ceremonies at my very first wedding, and because of that, I was well behaved. And after one too many cold beverages, courtesy of the Coca-Cola Company, obviously off the sauce because I was driving, I shambled off to the men's room just to arrive in time for a lesson in Communications 101. Two guys who had a skinful already letting fly at the small urinal decided to pass the seconds by having the most in-delay conversation I've ever had the misfortune of walking in on. So how's it going? Me? Yep. Good. You? Yeah, good. You had a dance yet? Me? Yeah. You? And on it went, ever so slowly, agonisingly slowly. By the time they finally got to actually introducing themselves to each other, I'd already finished my business, finished this book, 3 crossword puzzles, and a family-sized meat lover's pizza. With the monumental brain power of these two geniuses, time had slowed down to a crawl. So much that when I finally washed my hands, it was New Year's Eve. And by the time I walked out of the bathroom, it was my birthday in March already. Now, never let it be said that I don't enjoy weddings. I don't just turn up for the bride and groom, I also turn up for the feed, the drink, and the entertainment, whether I cause it or someone else does. I slunk back in my seat and amused myself with some more forks, empty bottles of beer, and whatever that dessert with too much chocolate was until my eyes started to droop. The jokes started to wear thin, and the room started wondering why they were all wearing the wrong size jackets. Oh, and for the record, I put my petrol-soaked pants into the tank on the Mazda on the way home. An extra 5 kilometres worth of juice. And here you thought the only point of pinstripes was to look good. Chapter 19. The petrol-soaked wedding where time stood still. You stand on the groom's side. You may now kiss the bride. You smell like petrol. The first two you'll hear at your next wedding. The last, well, that's what you probably would have heard if you ended up on the same table as I did over the weekend. The shirt was half ironed, the tie was sharp, and the smell of cologne was just enough to hide the scent of the 8 coffees I'd had to make it to that point. Yet, in the 3 minutes it took to fill up the Mazda on the way down to the wedding venue was obviously enough time for something petrol-smelling to soak up into my outfit. Chapter 20. Inside the Outside Broadcast. For anyone who hasn't been witness to a radio station outside broadcast yet, it works like this. A business hires the radio station to do a particular show or shift live from their premises, making noise about their product or service and generating more interest from fans at the station to swing by and check it all out. Ideally, the more people that turn up, the more interest is generated, the more sales are made by the business, and everyone goes home happy. I'll admit that I've played my part in plenty of them over my radio career. From a couple of quick crosses back to the studio to promote a toy sale, to electrical retailer super sales, right through to a 6-hour extravaganza in front of the local town fountain, raising money for, well, it was some kind of charity from memory. When outside broadcasts work, they work really well and can really help draw a crowd and provide a pretty decent boost to the sales figures of the day or weekend. Or at least a bit more awareness across the town of what the business is about. When they go completely balls up though, well, here's 3 great examples that spring to mind, and thankfully I was only involved in one of them. Come and join us for a workout in the van. A new gym had just opened up on the other side of town, and in the interests of promoting this new place to get sweaty and hopefully trim, the owners bought an outside broadcast for opening day, which also turned out to be one of the coldest days of winter. Wanting the biggest audience, they shelled out for a breakfast outside broadcast, far more expensive than one during the morning or the weekend. And the sales rep who booked the 4 hours had suggested we turn up in our finest gym gear and put all the cutting-edge equipment through its paces while we did the show, just for a bit of fun and colour. Just as dawn broke on the super frost-generating morning of the outside broadcast, I'd managed to drive the broadcast van past the gym a total of 3 times before my bemused co-host called me and directed me to a laneway without a single sign advertising its location. While dragging the equipment to the door, I also noticed that there were no signs up yet on the outside of the gym. It must have been on the list of last-minute things to finish up, I mused, as I walked through the door and quickly discovered if it was on the list, it'd be well and truly near the bottom. Because sitting in the middle of this brand new gym were 4 mildly annoyed men with mugs of coffee and a sole toolbox between them, attempting to put together an entire gym load of cutting-edge equipment. And by the looks of things, when we got there, they just completed the seat part of 1 exercise bike, and that was about it. What a ripper way to kick off open day. Not a single bit of anything ready to go. So for the next 4 hours, we huddled in the back of a very cold work van, subtly explaining on air that while today was open day, tomorrow would be a much bigger launch day, and you'd have far more fun checking out things tomorrow instead. as at least one exercise bike would be completed by then, and then you could walk around it and ooh and ah to your heart's content, while marvelling at the rest of the best equipment money could buy in various parts of assembly at the moment. Now, remember how the helpful sales rep had suggested wearing gym gear? Well, we had foolishly agreed with him, thinking that using the various machines would well and truly keep us warm. And while I'd opted for a t-shirt and a pair of tracksuit pants, my co-host had instead rolled up in a pair of the shortest gym shorts possible and a singlet combo. He then spent the next 4 hours cursing this decision while doing his half of the show, attempting to unsuccessfully shield himself from the freezing cold under an emergency fire blanket he found in the back of the van. Even with the van's heaters on full bore, it was still cold enough to kill any and all heat once it got to the back, where all of our gear was set up. The gym owner did venture out for an occasional interview and fetch a coffee, but he must have got trapped in a conversation with the coffee shop, as by the time he got back, they were as cold as my co-host's now partially frozen legs. Thankfully, our suggestions of waiting a day to see this place in all of its glory seemed to have worked, as not a single soul, aside from ourselves, rolled up to have a look at this new place of fitness, and for 4 hours we only had ourselves, the panel operator back in the studio, and the numbing cold all around us to keep us amused. We drove back to the station grumbling all the way and blasted the sales rep when we finally saw him for sending us out there when it wasn't even ready. Incredibly, with such a monumental launch, a mere 9 months later, the gym closed its doors and shut up shop. I never found out if they ever put the signs up to actually point out where it was. It's brown and squarish. This outside broadcast wasn't one I copped, but around the station it went down as station law and was too good not to include in this list of complete failures. The poor bastard involved, for the purposes of this story we shall now just call him K, still winces when you remind him of this time, but has thankfully gone so much further in his radio career that the odds of anything like this happening again to him are less than zero. And if he did get a similar job like this one nowadays, he'd be well and truly paid well for the experience. Because a few years ago, poor K had to broadcast for 4 agonisingly long hours at a block of land in the middle of nowhere, next to other empty blocks of land, and had to make the whole process sound incredibly exciting to anyone still listening. To put this into perspective, the next time you drive into the countryside, find a random patch of barren land somewhere, park there, and try to get excited for the next 4 hours describing what you see. The land was part of a local auction, and to really point out the possible savings you might be able to make, someone came up with the idea of having K on site, doing his music shift right next to, a big flat expanse of dirt. Just K, the broadcast fan, and possibly a passing bird or two. Maybe a worm as well. There were no shops nearby, no place to get lunch, no petrol stations or drive-through coffee venues, no hardware stores, no pizzerias, no signs of life, and would you believe it, not a single other person out there. And as hard as poor K tried to jazz up a deceptively flat and incredibly dull-looking patch of dirt, nobody in the listening audience found the time nor any sane reason to venture out in those 4 hours to see this possible amazing bargain in person. Poor guy. And the man behind this groundbreaking idea to broadcast next to nothing for 4 straight hours? Coincidentally, the same guy who booked 2 announcers to roll up to a brand new gym and gym gear, only to spend the next 4 hours in a freezing van parked outside. And finally, the smoke from the staff-only area. Now, you'd be thinking that after 4 hours attempting to sell the virtues of a section of rocks and dirt, that'd be it for the bizarre outside broadcast adventures of poor K. But no, he copped another ripper with the latest BMX shop in town. They too were sold an outside broadcast for their opening day. And while it beat broadcasting in the middle of nowhere for longer than was mentally healthy, poor K spent a lot of the time there trying to reassure the owner that he would be okay having a chat on air. To help paint the picture of a business or a service during an outside broadcast, usually a manager or staff member joins the announcer for a quick on-air chat about what they do, share some bargains for the day, and invite people to see the place in person. Some of the people are naturally chatty and relish the chance to play a radio star, while some shy away from an outstretched microphone like it's a leprous limb from a poor unfortunate we found in a nearby medical waste bin at the local hospital. The guy at the BMX shop, he shook like an out-of-kilter washing machine at the thought of getting on air. However, having no idea about anything BMX related, Kay did manage to convince this manager that he would be far better explaining what was on offer than he ever could, and the guy reluctantly agreed, on the strange condition that he be given a 30-minute warning and subsequent warnings each 10-minute block until it was time. So, Kay complied and gave Mr. BMX a half-hour warning, then a 20-minute warning, a 10-minute reminder, and even threw in a 5-minute warning for good measure. With 3 minutes before the song finished and Kay having to go back on air, ready to chat to Mr. BMX, the owner quickly raced out the back of the staff-only office, and a very bemused Kay watched on as a small plume of smoke suddenly appeared through the back door. This was quickly followed by the sound of water being sucked through some kind of smoking implement, and 2 more mini plumes followed in quick succession. Mr. BMX then calmly strolled over to the outside broadcast set up within 60 seconds to spare and proceeded to turn a 3-minute chat into 7.5 minutes of one-sided ramble where he managed to repeat his list of brands an impressive 4.5 times before he realised what he was doing. Thankfully, this was the first and only time he ever got on air, and a mere 6 months later, the place had gone out of business, for whatever reason. I don't know if it was the same sales rep involved with this one like the other two, but the way things happened, I really wouldn't put it past him. Chapter 21. Burn the Stake and Your Memories. Reliving childhood memories or attempting to charge into the halls of hell headfirst with just a tissue dampened with water. By the time my better half and I had crawled out of this once-upon-a-time delectable family restaurant, close to $80 down and with nothing even remotely fun to show for it, we couldn't decide which it was. Chalk it up to a good idea that will never, ever be repeated. In my halcyon days, this was a very popular family chain restaurant, full of awe and wonderment, and you'd relish the twice-a-year visit with the grandparents and the like. Dinner and a soft drink? We never get the fizzy stuff at home. Part of the appeal for a place like this was that you could stuff your face with everything, and there was just about everything on offer. The salad bar had a better selection than your local market, and if you wanted to, you could just rock up and order a plate for said salad and pasta bar, not exiting the premises until you had to be rolled out by your fellow diners. As tempting as that was, however, for just a few dollars more, you could order one of the main meals, including steak selections, and get the salad bar for free. So, at a loose end one night while on holidays, and looking around for any semi-decent eatery, we decided a trip down memory lane was in order, and gave this family restaurant, who still shall not be named, the revisiting treatment. Although I can tell you, it rhymes with Dizzler. Before you knew it, we were at the registers ready to order. "We will destroy some steak tonight," my stomach cheered, and before you could say, "Wait, what animal did that come from?" we'd ordered the steak and calamari, and the steak and asparagus spears respectively. Armed with visions of devouring a tender slab of something that was once cow, smothered in mushroom sauce of course, we ran into oddity number 1. I'd ordered a vodka lime and soda. The guy, who looked like he'd just been born a week ago or so, gave me a glass with just straight vodka in it, and then instructed me to walk to the other side of the restaurant to pour the rest of the drink into the glass via the drinks dispenser. Apparently, while I'd paid for a vodka mix, I had to make it myself. If that wasn't fun enough, the looks I got from everyone who'd lined up with a refillable glass, for the low price of only $4.95, thought I was freeloading with the spirits class. Yes, that's right, I obviously order shots of straight vodka and try to steal lemon, lime and soda wherever I go. Waiting for either a sign of heavenly redemption or our steaks, whichever miracle occurred first, we opted for an all-out assault on the salad bar first up. Chicken, spinach, noodles, sauces, and God knows what else went flying in mad abandon. I'm sure I accidentally sliced through some kid's arm and adding it to my plate in a hurry. Not that I'd notice. I was that hungry. As I was tucking into salad plate number 2, a waiter appeared, informing us our steaks would be out of the kitchen in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, he'd get us some complimentary cheese bread. Well, the bread arrived shortly after, and mere seconds later, so did our steaks. However, it was at this exact moment that all hopes of a delectable steak dinner became dashed. Any resemblance to the picture of the steak shown on the menu had well and truly disappeared. As I lifted it up with my fork to see if they'd cunningly concealed the meat under the char-grilled thing taking centre place stage, I began to worry that someone had carved off a selection of tyre from our hire car and baked that for a bit. It looked nothing like meat, part of a cow, or edible in that order. Any old miner worth his salt would be proud if he chipped this thing out of solid rock. I thought that was pretty bad until I attempted to digest the calamari, which suspiciously looked like the deep-fried and battered rubber bands out of a teenager's braces. It looked to be the Guinness World Record holder for the world's smallest calamari, and tasted more like what holds your fridge door in place than anything that once lived under the sea. Once again, a massive difference in appearance compared to the picture that graced the menu. Juicy selections of squid, lovingly battered and lightly fried. Luckily, the asparagus on the better half's plate did vaguely resemble the spear-like vegetable, but her steak was in just the same level of despair as mine. Dragged through hell, stripped of its soul, and smashed with a sledgehammer. And then they cooked it. Bless my wife, though, as she humorously suggested we order dessert there in an attempt to rectify the carnage on the plate. But no, enough was enough. Knowing this place and their prowess so far, they'd probably march out another waiter with an ice cream scoop, complete with a 5-minute lesson on how to use it. Next time, give me a place where I don't have to play bartender and mix my own drinks, where I don't have to play zoologist to work out what I'm eating, and where I don't have to sign over my house to order dinner. Sorry, younger version of me, we should have left those fond memories in the past where they'd stay untarnished. Chapter 22. 30 Years of Hangover. There's a bit of a cool story to this one. The year was 1980, and according to Wikipedia, lots of cool stuff was happening. It was a leap year that started on a Tuesday. Professor Longhair died. And, the Mariel boat lift ended, whatever that was. In amidst these truly earth-shattering events, though, I was born. And friends of my father decided to give this little bundle of something that occasionally resembled joy a big 6-litre bottle of the finest red wine their brilliant vineyard could make. Yes, a giant bottle of great red that you can't usually buy in stores. That's why the 80s were truly the best decade ever, because you got a bottle of wine the size of a 10-year-old when you were learning how to crawl, babble and poo yourself. The idea, of course, was to open the huge bottle up on the very day I turned 21. And when the day finally rolled around, it was a decent-sized celebration involving friends and family turning up to join in the festivities. Drink was drunk, food was consumed at a decent rate, even a cigar was half-smoked. I'm not a big smoker. But after the smoke and debris cleared, I realised that I'd left the oversized bottle at home. The celebratory red Teltani holy water would have to be drunk on another occasion. Flash forward 9 years later, and I came to the amazing conclusion that still, even though I'd moved many a time and taken the giant bottle with me every single time, I still hadn't found the time or an event worthy of popping the cork. I'd even had it valued, and even the valuer suggested popping it open rather than attempting to sell it. So it stayed in the dark some more, doing not much in a dark corner of my cupboard until that fateful day in March when I figured that come hell or high water, that bottle would be opened on my 30th birthday. Would it be the finest product of the grape? Or would it be completely and utterly undrinkable and more effective as paint stripper? Plenty of people at the momentous event took a sample, and here were the results. Now, please note that I'm the furthest away from a wine expert that you can get. This was my dad's gig, and something he did ridiculously well. My notes are based on zero training and nothing intelligent whatsoever. First up, we've got the colour. Not the deep dark red as I'd hoped for. Even though it had spent most of its life on its side in a dark place at Dad's insistence, the colour really did take on the coppery aspect of blood. Real blood, not Hollywood blood. And seemed to have lost some of its viscosity. No sediment though, which was good. If it was scanned by a paint matching machine, it had probably come close to a glossy Mongolian deep rust, or a big bottle of Coke that's been a touch bleached by the sun. The smell. Ever opened a bottle of your grandma's port and have your nostrils assailed by the very strong smoothness? This smelt strongly of watered down port mixed with some weak house red from a cheap and nasty Italian restaurant where you'd buy it in a big silver bag. This, of course, was nowhere near what I'd imagined a 30-year-old Cabernet Sauvignon to smell like. Not that I'd really know what it's supposed to smell like after 30 years, but surely not like this. I'd attempt to list the scents a la half-decent wine writers, but I couldn't tell you if it had vague hints of tobacco or banana leaf or chocolate or anything. It just didn't smell like it probably should have. The cork. Like a mangled car wreck toasted in fire and then doused in soothing fortified wine directly after. It didn't pop out, more so rotted out. No need for an oversized bottle opener when your girlfriend, now my wife, can slide out a very giant cork with her fingernails. This cork had obviously had a very tough life and was probably very thankful it finally came up for air. It's never a good sign when something that's supposed to be sealing the contents of a bottle slides out smoother than Teflon. The taste. First sip, and instantly the thought was, wait, this doesn't taste like Cab Sav at all. Upon the second sip, hey, it tastes more like watered down port. And the third sip netted me the, wow, this thing didn't mature, it fortified itself. Is this possible? I have no idea whatsoever. Do I look like a wine specialist? But that's what it tasted like. Imagine if a fortified port went to a gym with no warm-up whatsoever and proceeded to beat the hell out of itself for a few hours, then had a strength test which it failed miserably. Think rookie port made in someone's shed that's lacking in strength, smoothness, and the warming effect that really makes it enjoyable. I was drinking Port BC, a self-created experiment that really didn't bear any of the fruit, namely tasty grapes, that I wanted. The after effect. Like a night on the garlic pizza with an uncle who simply won't go home no matter how loud and embarrassing he gets after having a few, this thing lingered like nothing else I'd ever seen. The watered-down flavour stayed around my mouth for a very long time, and rather than being memorable, it seemed to linger worse as time went on. It started as an okay sensation, but then seemed to age around my gums during the ad breaks. Maybe it's like if you drink from the wrong Holy Grail in an Indiana Jones film. This stuff aged 1 billion years in a few moments. The longer it aired, the worse it got, to the point of vinegar. And then 20 minutes later, the headache arrived. The hangover had begun before I'd even gone to bed. Not what I usually expect from a glass of red. To be honest, I wasn't expecting much from this. I knew the coin would fall one of two ways, brilliantly or completely undrinkable. Well, technically you can drink it, but A, you'll want to drink it quickly before the heir puts it in a nursing home, and B, you wouldn't want to throw it back in the closet for another 30 years or so because there's no chance in wine hell that this will get better than where it is now. And of course, the question remains, what the hell am I going to do now with 5.5 litres of watered down port? Quick update. I ended up pouring what was left on the grass out the back, magically killing the weeds there and pretty much everything else. While the thought of keeping the bottle around for another 30 years could be amusing, it really didn't serve any further purpose being in a dark cupboard for the rest of its life. So I found an ex-employee of a local vineyard and donated it to her bottle collection. It's taken pride of place next to some 70s bottles and what I can only assume is a jug of moonshine, which probably tasted better than this wine did. Chapter 23. Ponying up for coffee and conversation. While on the way in the war wagon, the nickname for most of my cars, to pick up my son from daycare, today's topic on the Dan and Maz radio show here in Australia was a great listen. Sugar daddies and the women who date them. Holly shared her story, and it seems like I've been doing this dating thing completely wrong all this time. I must admit, I was riveted by Holly sharing her story, and let's be honest here, Holly was not her real name, as she was quite happy to chat about the who, the what, the where, the why, and the when in still suitable for daytime radio detail. I was so engrossed that I actually parked in the daycare car park and listened as much as I could before getting out to get Jackson. Not that he'd mind an extra 5 minutes of daycare playtime in the playground at the back though. She explained that she turned to the world of sugar daddies, firmly based through dating websites, because of her desire to be supported while pursuing her studies and not having to worry about making ends meet while chasing dreams. Obviously, Holly is a little tired of the amazing flavour varieties of 2-minute noodles, it seems, even though chicken flavouring is pretty damn tasty. Plus, she had a couple of sick family members she wanted to spend more time with, and having a partner who could fund both her studies and time off would be a huge bonus. So, she logged on to one of the sites, and it wasn't long before the dates began. And that's when Holly started to learn more about this seemingly increasingly popular world, apart from the common thread of being rich and ready to mingle. Namely, a lot of the sugar daddies actually didn't have the time for a proper long-term let's move in together relationship, preferring short-term flings and adventures. A paid port in every harbour? Well, possibly. Some wanted to be exclusive, while some didn't care that Holly may have been seeing someone else at the time. Some users of the sites would message her directly and offer up cash in the return for something in particular. While I'll leave you to use your own imagination here, I'll give you a hint. It wasn't to bake them a pie for an upcoming Bring a Homemade Pie night. This wasn't the kind of dating she was looking for, though. Some were already married. She never explained if the wives in this situation knew or not, but I'm going to err on the side of probably not here. Most of the gifts she received were in the form of cash. Yes, cash gifts, either in a group of notes or a direct deposit. I don't think any of the sugar daddies ever quietly slid a crumpled brown bag under the table, stuffed with all kinds of denominations, but having never dated one myself, I couldn't tell you if this was true or not. A smooth-looking briefcase with a combination lock would have been a much better and classier choice anyway. Which led me to the highlight of this very revealing chat. The day she woke up and found $4,000 in her bank account. It was the morning after a coffee date, and as a thanks for meeting me, there was 4,000 shekels sitting comfortably, gaining interest. No idea if there was a second date or not, but the fact remains that she got 4 Gs for meeting someone just for a cappuccino and a chat. Anytime I hit up a cafe, I usually wake up with a little less money than I started with. Now, not having, and probably never will be, crossing paths with Holly, I can't actually compare my looks to hers, and therefore reveal if I'm a far better catch. Although I'll bet she can't change the oil on a Nissan wagon like I can, so there is that. But I am still willing to make this particular offer to the rich and obviously lonely millionairesses of the world. Even though I am happily married with 2 lovely kids and will never cheat on my lovely wife, I will consider having coffee with you provided you pony up with any of the following. $1,000 cash. That's an introductory coffee date rate. Some tools for the shed. Just some mid-level gear is fine unless you want to give me a fully working CNC machine, just because. If this happens, I will pretend to enjoy your jokes just that little bit more. My credit card paid off. There's a bit there to work with. Please be aware though, it's just coffee and idle chit-chat, nothing more. Okay, maybe a slice of chocolate cake too. I'm quite partial to a slice of chocolate fudge cake. However, my clothes will stay on before and after our little catch-up, and you don't get to brag about my hidden abs. If you want to pretend I'm interested in what you have to say, a steak sandwich would have to be included with the coffee. Laughing at your jokes may incur a fee of a cider or a beer, depending on my mood. If you're keen on dinner though, there better be something Japanese turbo and rare parked in my driveway. So with this tantalising offer, who's keen? Anyone? What if we start the bidding at $5? Chapter 24. I love you. Now, could you grab me the bandages? On Valentine's Day this year, I managed to stab myself with an ice cream scooper. Yep, when I do Valentine's Day, I really do Valentine's Day, to the point where medical attention may be needed. That's how much I love you, Donna. Enough to brave hell, high water, family reunions, and possible impalement with an ice cream scoop. Now, before you write in thinking I'm going to join your very obscure ice cream scooper-related S&M kink, know that it was completely unintentional. Drawing blood while attempting to serve up dessert was not on the agenda. In fact, I'll put it right down the bottom of the things I hope happen on February 14th list, just under a visit by religious lunatics ready to serve up a sermon on my doorway. Now, the plan was to serve up some homemade apricot ice cream to my wife in a display of culinary brilliance that would have left the hardiest of MasterChef judges drooling in anticipation. This would have been a far cry from the handwritten card, box of chocolates, or flower deliveries I usually count on, but I figured it was worth a shot. What woman doesn't like a man who can cook? Or in this case, work a freezer? Conjuring up memories of my mother's amazing homemade dried apricot ice cream from when my brother Guy and I were kids, I figured I was onto a complete and utter winner here, and I'd be drowning in brownie points before the night's end. What happened instead was an interesting mess on a plate that I had to saw out of the bowl, coupled with a quick trip to the bathroom cabinet by my bemused wife for a bandage. Now, the idea was solid. Find a decent recipe for dried apricot ice cream. Yes, I should have asked my mum, but the idea was a last-minute one, and I needed something quickly. Whip up a batch the night before and win major husband points for the rest of the year when I wheeled out my frozen surprise. Only, this was my very first attempt at making anything even remotely ice cream related, and in my attempt to win 8 Michelin stars in one hit, I missed a couple of steps. Namely, I don't have an ice cream maker. This would probably have improved everything to no end, and made the ice cream actually look similar to actual ice cream, not the frozen solid block blob of creamy mix that I whipped up. Instead of constantly churning the mix, I just threw it in the freezer, which resulted in an ice cream that had 2 layers and patches of random ice crystals throughout. The orange juice mix hung around the top, which meant the chunks of dried apricot all moved to the bottom of the bowl in a kind of Jackson Pollock-like frozen chunky spew motif. Lovely. You just don't see these kind of rare techniques on TV. You know how in food websites and magazines, they always make the orange ice cream look bloody amazing, complete with perfect measured scoops and a sprig of fresh mint on top for decoration? Well, I didn't have any mint left, and when I tried to make my dish worthy for an Instagram moment, it all came horribly undone. Now, while I was worried about it not freezing for some reason, it went completely the other way and came out harder than Wolverine's adamantium skeleton. For those non-comic fans joining us, think of it as tough as a freeway retaining wall. And after some time in the microwave, on defrost, it was still set on diamond density, But I figured that with a bit of stiff upper lippedness, I could carve enough off to make a semblance of a dessert. So I took the now warmed up bowl of hot water ice cream scooper and went to town. I put a little pressure on it and snap! The metal scoop came off the plastic handle in an act of furious rebellion. Of course, with the pressure I was putting on the scoop to actually dig into the frozen block, the momentum pushed it through the air and the follow-through made me slam it into my chest. Yes, I accidentally stabbed myself with half an ice cream scoop. Kind of like ramming the non-pointy end of a pen into your solar plexus for shits and giggles. After a loud grunt from the hit that would make a warthog proud, I was hesitant to look down, lest there was a handle still embedded in my stomach. Thankfully, there wasn't. And I'd like to say it was due to it bouncing off my surgical steel-like abdominal muscles, but the truth was the broken end wasn't sharp enough to impale the chef of the year. It did leave a nasty mark and hell of a deep scratch in passing, and my wife raced in to see what trouble I'd found myself in this time. There was a little blood, yes, but thankfully not enough to have me explaining to the local emergency department how an attempt at dried apricot ice cream had gone horribly wrong. I bet that's a first for paramedics though. After Donna fished out a Band-Aid, the now completely useless scooper hit the bin, and I carefully used a serrated knife to saw out a couple of bowls of the sweet stuff. Who knew a knife usually reserved for slicing through crusty bread would turn out pretty handy when I was making dessert? I actually should send a note of thanks to the knife makers. The ice cream was, well, pretty tasty actually. 4 out of 5 stars I'd give it. Probably a couple of apricot chunk batches too many, but hey, I enjoyed it for my first attempt, once I got past the random patches of ice caves throughout the mix. And my wound is healing nicely, thanks for asking. There probably won't be a scar to tell the grandkids about, however, which is a bonus. Next time when it comes to ice cream though, I might just leave things to the professionals and grab some from the supermarket on the way home from work. Less chance of a stabbing that way. Now after all that, has anyone got a good recipe for chocolate mousse? Chapter 25. Next time, we use a double. It's not unusual when doing breakfast radio to be involved in a stunt or two, and most of the time they were both pretty amusing and fun. Drive a monster truck around the local oval to promote the trucks there this weekend? Sure, throw me the keys. Pour this bucket of ice water over my head to help promote motor neurone disease awareness. Not a problem, I'll grab a towel. Eat a spoonful of chili sauce every time my co-host got a question correct in an insane quiz we came up with that morning? Well, what can possibly go wrong there? I can tell you that after 6 spoonfuls of chili sauce on an empty stomach, I sure didn't feel the greatest. But there was no lasting damage, so we'll chalk that up as a success. But there was a time when stunts were involved that more often than not, I'd find a creative way to inadvertently injure myself, much to the amusement of my co-host, hi Alex, thanks for constantly helping me back to my feet, and the worry of my ever-loving partner and now wife, sorry Donna. Here's a few of the lowlights. Run on for a long time. To promote a new gym in town, and not the same gym we spent 4 hours outside of because nothing was ready for open day, a stunt was devised in the form of a challenge. Let's find out which announcer could run the furthest distance on a treadmill within an hour time limit. Now, 2 obvious problems sprang to mind immediately here. The first being that Alex was quite a few inches taller than I was and had a far greater stride than I did, meaning I'd really have to pull out all the stops to get even close to his distance, let alone exceed it. The second was that I didn't have a single stop to pull out, as I'm a shocking runner, jogger, anything other than strolling at normal pace. Unless it was a 10-second sprint during my high school years to catch the nearest tram, forget about it. I'd be gasping and wheezing faster than Grandpa's hand-me-down 1950s mower. Alex had running experience, occasionally went jogging, and could do quite well on a treadmill. This was a terrible idea before it even started. Picture an endurance race between a finely tuned motorbike and a drunk rolling around in a shopping trolley with 2 missing wheels. And you pretty much have pictured the upcoming battle on the treadmill. Well, it would have looked like that if the personal trainers at the gym hadn't suggested at my 40-minute mark that I should probably stop, as I'd gone white as a sheet and my matchstick-like legs were starting to shake like an unbalanced cement mixer. They were seriously concerned that I would either pass out mid-run, now that is dedication to a run, or possibly die standing up. Plus, I was starting to gasp like a blocked-up locomotive. So they stopped the machine, lowered me down to sitting position, and pumped plenty of sports drinks into me, so I would look a little less see-through. Non-surprisingly, Alex won that challenge by more than 4 kilometres, and we both agreed to cross running challenges off the list of future stunt ideas. Hold your ribs and prepare to jump. In a fun way to fundraise, a local charity group was offering skydives. The deal was if you signed up and managed to raise at least $1,000 for the charity, I think it was for some refugees, possibly, then you were invited to jump out of a perfectly good plane at a high altitude and come floating back down to Earth. And being the local radio station that was promoting this endeavour, we were invited to participate in both the fundraising and the jump itself once we met the target. So one morning on The Breakfast Show, we put it to the community and asked for any odd jobs to help pay our charity fee. A local gym rang up. Seriously, what is the deal with gyms? Especially with me and things going wrong at gyms. And offered up a few $100 in sponsorship if we helped out during the day by toweling down people doing a workout and trying not to get in the way. So we rolled up to the gym with towels in hand and proceeded to towel dry people left, right and centre and participate in various gym challenges. Alex had to take on a squatting front plate raise for 30 seconds. He did quite well. Whereas I, for some reason, ended up on the world's most intense leg press machine. Now, maybe the personal trainer that was leading us around didn't like the fact that he had to lead us around for the morning, or hated charity, or just radio announcers in general. But he decided that for my challenge, he really needed to stack on the plates and take off the safety guards, which resulted in a ton of weight pushing down on my not very strong matchstick legs and compacting everything up to my chest in record time. I got crunched up like a car in the crusher. A muscle in my chest went twang, and suddenly there were two trainers pushing the weight back up and Alex helping me out shakily to my feet. The trainer apologised profusely for taking the guards off, very fearful that he may lose his job, and Alex really wanted to try and get him fired when he had no idea about my limited lifting capabilities. I limped out of the gym and figured that in a couple of days' time the pain would subside and I'd be getting on with life. 2 weeks later, I found myself on the table at the local myotherapy clinic where a tiny woman was bringing a fully grown man to absolute tears trying to get everything back into place. She had the incredible strength of a hydraulic press as she pulled and shifted muscles back into some semblance of working order. She also suggested that maybe it wasn't the wisest idea to hurl myself out of a plane while everything was hurting so much. But miss out on my very first skydive? Perish the thought! Note, I'm an absolute idiot, really. So you can just imagine the breathtaking pain I felt when they strapped me into the parachute pack a mere week later and insisted that everything had to be cinched in tight, which they did with plenty of enthusiasm, especially with the straps across my chest, causing me to almost burst into tears into my very tight goggles. Luckily, I hid it very well. Only my wife really knew how much pain I was in at the time. And they probably thought my eyes were misting up with the upcoming excitement. It also didn't help that the plane was smaller than most hatchbacks, and given that it was a tandem jump, it was a very tight and painful ride up to about 8,000 feet. Now, there is a good end to this story, thankfully, and that is when we finally jumped out, the pure adrenaline completely washed away any pain and discomfort I had on the way down. Once he popped the chute, it was one of the most serene and beautiful experiences I've ever had, taking in the gorgeous sights of the countryside in amazing quiet. If only it could have lasted a few minutes or perhaps hours or maybe even days longer. And I'd highly recommend it when you're not walking around attempting to hide a chest injury. Of course, the jolt when we landed shot fire through my chest and reminded me of the hilariously awful journey I'd been on to get to this point. Luckily, a couple of weeks of rest on the couch and non-stunt related work activity later, and everything slowly returned to normal. My chest eventually not complaining every time I did, well, anything. Well, that was until I got a lesson at wrestling school, that is. Throw this hand up so he knows where to hit you. So the wrestling was coming to town and I was getting stupidly excited because I've been a bit of a wrestling fan since way back. And not only were we going to interview some of the wrestlers, names I recognised like Iron Man Rob Conway, Jimmy Wang Yang and Mike Mondo, but the promoter really wanted us involved in the back end of a match. To the point where Alex and I would end up in a wrestling-related stunt together. Hands up if you can see how badly this is going to end up. Since I was more than happy to take the fall, do a job in a wrestling match, of course, I'm not Hulk Hogan, it was suggested that I attend a lesson at the nearest wrestling school to learn how to bump properly, fall safely and make it look good. And fast forward 2 weeks later, there we were standing outside a random house an hour away from home, wondering if we turned up at the wrong place. But no, it turned out to be the right place as somehow the owner, a long-term Australian wrestler, had managed to construct a decent-sized wrestling ring in a very flimsy-looking shed at the back. There was just enough room between the shaky walls and the edge of the ring for some bench seats, so my heavily pregnant wife and future son Jackson watched on with equal parts amusement and concern. One of the guys I trained with explained later that on more than one occasion, wrestlers had gone over the ropes and right through a side wall covered in old wrestling posters and ending up in the garden. Luckily, I was there just to learn how to land rather than fly, so any high spots were not on the agenda. First up, it was the back bumps, landing safely on your back, which I performed okay as long as I remembered to actually push off with my legs and not just topple over like I was a very stiff log. But then the front bumps started to get more and more painful as I continually failed to get my hands in the way quick enough to absorb the impact. So the part of my body that I kept landing on all morning while learning to land safely? Why, my chest, of course. Push forward, land on chest, throw out arms to cushion the... Oh, too late. Okay, try again. Push forward, land on chest, throw out arms to cushion... No, got the order incorrect again. This happened a lot. And it wasn't long after the session that my old skydiving injury reintroduced itself. Glorious! I was about to do a wrestling spot and I could barely move without wincing again, courtesy of my very painful left-hand side. Now, the plan on the night of the show was that I would be the manager for the Aussie rate tank Kelly Slater, and Alex would represent visiting ex-WWE superstar Serena Deeb. While the professionals fought in the ring, the unprofessionals on the outside would yell at each other and anything within range. Fan favourite Serena would win, Alex would roll in and celebrate. Kelly would attack Serena, I'd jump on the apron and grab Alex, Kelly would throw a kick, he'd duck, and I'd get planted falling to the floor. This plan changed a couple of times, with the booker coming up with a few different angles. And eventually it was decided that after Serena won, I'd get in the ring yelling and screaming in her face. And eventually push her where she slapped me, in return spinning me around and right into the path of an Alex spear. Job done. Now, the plan came with some very specific instructions too. Nick the booker explained that when I spun around, I had to throw up one of my arms and Alex would use that as a signal to spear me on that side to avoid catching my arms and possibly breaking one or both when we landed. Yeah, no pressure with the guy already walking around with a very sore chest. But we agreed, and I secretly prayed nothing would go wrong when the match got underway. The girls had a fantastic back and forth clash involving some painful looking slams and a comedy spot with the ref. While that was going on, I was quite enjoying yelling at Alex and random crowd members while praising the virtues of the rate tank. When it was all said and done and Serena scored the win, I rolled in and got right in her face, accusing her of cheating, amongst other things. I got so into the yelling and carrying on that I completely forgot the next part. "Push me," she whispered while I was waving my arms around a lunatic. "What?" "Don't forget to push me." "Oh, yeah." So I pushed her. She slapped me, and I stumbled around rather than spun into a crunching Alex tackle. He stood over me, the crowd cheered, they both did some victory poses as I sold the injury and rolled out of the ring. Kelly and I supported each other as we crawled all the way out the back, but it wasn't until a cheering Alex walked out through the curtain that I realised the push wasn't the only part of the plan that I'd forgot. Which side did I tackle you on? Hopefully not the really sore side." "I don't remember," I said. "Which arm did I end up throwing up?" "I didn't look," he shrugged. "Just ran into you." Luckily, he didn't hit me in the really tender part, and we had a great laugh over the fact that we just made it through a wrestling match and I didn't need a stretcher to carry me out the back. Besides, there'd always be the opportunity to spend some time in the local emergency department the next time we got involved in a stunt for the breakfast show. Like an egg and spoon race or something extremely dangerous. Like a competitive game of the card game Go Fish, maybe. Chapter 26. I ate at the Vic and survived to tell the tale. A while back now, when yours truly still had a mop of hair and Facebook hadn't been invented, two friends and I had a Wednesday tradition. Each Wednesday night, we'd find somewhere new for dinner in the hope of discovering our new mecca of Wednesday night meals. Ultimately, we did find that place. Sadly, it no longer exists. After many fun and memorable adventures. The sad part to this story is that we had to endure the Vic Hotel to get there. For those of you about to step into the Vic, we salute you. But make sure you take in this helpful guide that is sure to increase your chances of coming out alive. On a quick note, we're not saying which Vic Hotel this is. There are a lot of them. That's up to you to discover if your testicles are suicidal or something. We're not putting the address up here just in case someone clever explains to them how lawyers work and I lose some petrol money or something. Don't make eye contact with anyone inside. It's kind of like prison. Don't get in anyone's way, don't be a bitch, don't gamble, and certainly don't strike up a lengthy conversation with the regulars. I was really surprised the bartender wasn't wearing an eye patch, had both his legs, and didn't curse my family name when I failed to order a Bundy and Coke. And after hearing this chat unravel near the pool tables at the Vic Hotel, we've concluded that intelligent conversation would probably start a 3-day riot. Incredibly drunk man called Ken.
Hush, what's your name?
Incredibly rough-looking woman with a speech impediment.
Allison.
We think she meant Allison.
Elephants?
No, listen.
I thought you said elephants. Do you want to play pool, elephants?
And so on it went. It's probably better to leave hungry. Remember in that Indiana Jones movie with the little Asian kid when they're invited to dinner and there's nothing recognisable on the table aside from chilled monkey brains? I would have killed for a serving of cold monkey grey matter instead of what I found as part of the smorgasbord at the Vic Hotel. The mini dim sims had the same density and flavour of rocks. The cocktail frankfurts had no skin on them because they'd been in the water for 6 years. The same water that hadn't been changed in so long, it bore a striking resemblance to Toyota Red Long Life coolant. The coloured pasta had lost all of its colour. Seriously, how long do you have to cook pasta for to bleach the life right out of it? Only the Vic Hotel knows the answer to that one. I don't remember what the desserts were. Like seeing your grandparents do the nasty, that's probably for the best. Don't expect much, scratch that, don't expect any entertainment. An upstanding local with more tats than teeth somehow coaxed the aging jukebox back into life, playing something with more grunt than all the utes parked outside combined. This inspired the somehow still standing incredibly drunk man called Ken to grab a pool cue and perform the worst monkey magic impersonation known to man, while dancing around and singing a completely different song. Amazingly, he managed to miss everything while twirling his stick around. Amazingly still, no one threw rubles at him when it was all over, because it really did feel like I was stuck in the worst flea pit in a Russian town, too tricky to pronounce, and he was the main attraction. Thankfully, Elephant didn't join him in a duet. Remember, if you make it out with no limbs broken, and or a marriage proposal from Ken, you're one of the lucky ones. And if your car is still where you parked it, and not currently on fire, well, consider that a bonus. Chapter 27. Meet the new boss. He's here all week. The boss is feeling a little under the weather and has put me in charge today via an all-staff email. Why he decided this was a good idea is anyone's guess. I guess it was either me or the lady that comes in on Mondays to water the plants. But in response, I have instantly elevated myself to the highest position that I could make up. Forget being CEO, I am now officially GMC, FOC, OOB, BQ. And you may call me Sir. You should see how much of my desk this new title plaque takes up. And I've issued the following changes. I am now boss, and this is what's happening. Number 1. The work-funded coffee van that used to make an appearance twice a week will now come around hourly, starting at 5 a.m. Those hard-working breakfast radio announcers need their brews, and they need them now. However, Jim's suggestion of a work-funded cigarette van that freely distributes cartons to employees has been turned down for health reasons. Number 2. Instead of expensive cars in the reserved car parks, I've initiated a change where only cars worth $5,000 or less can park there. Off the top of my head, there are currently 4 cars that fit that description, and half of that number belong to me. However, when the boss does return from his time off, I will know nothing at all about any oil stain that has mysteriously appeared where he usually parks. It's not my problem that his BMW has obviously sprung a leak. Number 3. Work uniform is now jeans and whatever t-shirt you find on the floor first thing in the morning. This is compulsory. However, in a show of respect, you can't wear a t-shirt with more oil or coolant stains on it than the new boss. Doing so will make me think you're gunning for my newly found position of power, and I just won't be happy. Number 4. All meetings, if any, I hate long-winded meetings, will now be catered, with counter meals from the local pub. Meetings can only run for 10 minutes maximum and be followed by 50 minutes of eating time, or its official name of meeting reflection. Number 5. Fellow employees will only be referred to by the nickname of their choice. If you want to be called Red Hot Boombox 69 Sex Machine by your fellow workers, they should respect that. And if you don't have a nickname, one will be provided for you from the communal emergency nickname box, so it is in your best interest to create one early that you'll enjoy being called. Number 6. A team of highly trained massage experts will now patrol the building looking for sore shoulders and tired muscles. And if they spot you looking in need of a massage, you are instructed to down tools and make your way to the massage room, where you will drink champagne, consume chocolates, and get the help you need until you are deemed fit to return to work. Again, this is compulsory. Rules are rules. Number 7. Every day is now theme day. And the theme is entirely up to the individual. Football colours day can be mixed with dress up as your favourite horse day, and so on. The theme of turn up late and go home early is always a popular one, as is wear shorts for some reason when it's bloody freezing outside day. Number 8. In the interests of diversity, if you speak another language, then we welcome you to speak it here. Fluent sailor or pirate is always a pleasure to hear and is highly encouraged. It's amazing how many employees switch from English to rambling after a long sales lunch. 8.1. However, while many new languages are welcome, corporate gibberish has now been banned. If your conversations consist of things like, the key performance indicators suggest a downward trend of retainable infinitely out-of-performing indexes, then you will receive a warning. Don't even pretend you have the slightest clue to what that actually means. Number 9. Beer o'clock has now been moved back a couple of hours on a Friday to 9 a.m. Designated drivers will be compensated with fuel and cleaning vouchers for any co-workers and or their spew they have to drive home. Number 10. The ban on the "that's what she said" joke will be temporarily lifted, until the joke is deemed out of control and unfunny again, where the ban will be reinstated. Dad jokes are a case-by-case decision. Number 11. For the new relaxed attitudes and general day-to-day office activities my previous changes have now implemented, regulations state that anyone performing any form of work experience whatsoever will now have to be aged 18 or older, and probably sign a waiver, just in case. Number 12. Finally, any accidental pay rises that I may give myself, purely by accident of course, during my time as GMC, FOC, OO, PhD, BBQ, all one day of it, will remain in place even when the actual boss comes back. It will be attributed to the accounting division and will not be rectified until my retirement. Boy, oh boy, with these new directives in play, I'll bet the boss will be well and truly impressed by my initiative when he returns. What could possibly go wrong with these ideas? Chapter 28. The place where no one can hear you swing. Now, if the sport of golf used a seating system similar to tennis, then with my amazing abilities with the clubs, I'd be completely off the list, and covered with stickers that read, "For the love of all nearby windows, please do not plant." It's not from lack of trying though. At least twice a year, work forgets how utterly terrible and occasionally terrifying I am on the greens and invites me to play with a group of clients. Perhaps it's to make the poorly skilled clients more confident in their own abilities, after witnessing me attempt to take out a nearby innocent tree with every swing, or maybe work's just up for a laugh. But somehow I keep getting invited back time and time again to play golf. Even Dad attempted to foster a love of the sport early with a kid-sized set of golf clubs and an annual trip to the nearest open park, but that usually involved more dirt being swung in the air than actual golf equipment, so he gave up pretty quickly on that idea. From the first hole to the last, usually not the full 18 as that would take way too long, it's the same process. Draw a line of sight to where I hope the ball should go, pretend to measure for wind, swing, and watch my ball defying all of my requests and go hooking off into the nearest tree, bush, or boundary. I have one of the worst hooks in the history of this fair game, which means my shots curve more than a decent racetrack and I spend more time in places that the groundskeeper steers clear of. The upside to this, thankfully there is at least one, is that I find a ton more lost golf balls than I started with, usually at the expense of the set that I started with. So for me, a game of golf is a decent distance walk, where occasionally you try to skim grass off a nicely manicured lawn, coupled with too much time crawling through bushes and scrubland, while the rest of the team I'm playing with wait patiently nearby. Well, for the first few holes at least. Once I discover at least one lost ball I can claim as my own, and the game continues until the next shot, where I lose my ball into the scrub on the other side of the hole, and the process begins again. Par for this hole? Well, it better be in the double digits, because that's what I'm getting close to. About as fun as a history lesson in income tax. However, a couple of years ago I decided, well, technically didn't decide, more or less had to, strip away quite a few things from the historic game and found it to be far more relaxing experience that didn't have me emerging from the forest with half a tree snagged in my pants. Yes, one Christmas day I spent the afternoon driving golf balls into the fading sunset. One man, a borrowed 3 wood, and a bag of battered golf balls, one after the other getting lost in the wilderness. What a relaxing way to unwind after Chrissy lunch and a couple of champagnes. The course was on the in-laws' farm, with plenty of acreage for my wild range of shots. The fairway was the fence. Get over the fence and consider that an incredibly accurate shot for a player of my abilities. The rough? Any count turds, fresh or crustified, and amazingly I didn't hit a single one. The hole? Well, there was none. This took a lot of stress right out of the game, not having a single thing to aim for, or a giant expanse of land to drop a ball onto. No sand traps or water, unless there was a puddle I didn't see. Drive every ball in your collection into the sunset, and when you're done, open up a beer and wander slowly through the paddock seeing what you can find. It may or may not include lost golf balls. Find what you can, return to the tee in front of the shed, and begin again. Now, if you're thinking, wait, this is just a very cheap and nasty version of a classic driving range, well, you're close. My version has me, though, and the occasional brother-in-law who will take a couple of swings and then walk off to get another drink, so there's no noise apart from nature, and no one to see you completely misfire and take out a nearby tractor. You also don't wander onto a driving range when your bucket is empty for fear of having your skull taken off with another player's golf ball. Yes, there's a bit of walking, but nowhere near as much as a full 18 holes, and far less scrub and bushland to forage through. I also proved that this version of golf can be a very cheap game to play, as long as you're me. There's no grounds fees, no golfing lessons, as no one judges your ability out here. Forget a full bag of clubs, I only used one, due to the fact that I only had the choice of 2 in total. No hiring a caddy, no special shoes, no gloves, no hats, no pants. I didn't need a putter, again, there was no hole. There's no one behind you waiting for you to finish what you're doing. You move as fast as you like and give up when it becomes too dark to see anything anywhere. Also, when I ran out of tees, I improvised with a rubber grommet that I found lying about that did just as well. I'd like to see that level of recycling in the PGA World Tour. I really would. All was going well until a swing that would make both Tiger Woods and the United States of Swingerdom very proud pulled a muscle in my side, which brought my impromptu farm-based golf career to a crashing halt. Still, I was quite proud of my stressless efforts and the fact that I can lose a bag of golf balls faster than anyone I know. And apologies to Barry, whose field I lost them in. That really won't help come mowing time. Now, if I could just make a little bit of coin and get some sponsorship from Nike. Chapter 29. The $500 CEO. Today, I bought some shares. Obviously, as a vitally important shareholder in a dog-eat caviar business world, this means that my world is going to change. Right freaking now. Yes, with my part ownership of some company that escapes me, 218 shares to be precise, I have now lifted myself to dizzying heights well above the common man. I have changed my one-stained blue-collar shirt for a Bulgarian mink smoking jacket with silk parachute and matching chinos. Someone in a suit worth more than your house just handed me 22 keys to every executive washroom in the surrounding business district. I also just had lunch consisting of a smoked tomato, a snifter of brandy, and a cigar the size of a limousine. Things are indeed looking up. Why, with my $500 Australian worth of the finest of fine sourced from the ASX stock, I will be implementing the following before you have the chance to say, Jeeves, fetch more blow and dancing girls for my investment club. In accordance to my immense wealth-generating services, my Toyota Sora will now be referred to as its more illustrious US name, namely the Lexus SC300. I will now only drive it on weekends, and when in the passenger seat, my wife will have to wear headscarves that fly off when you least expect it. No more instant coffee for me. It's nothing but cafe lattes from Indonesian bean-pooing supercats from now on. I'll have to go through the pantry and replace all of the international mustards with copious amounts of Grey Poupon. If anyone asks, crazy ball-chasing border collie Savannah will now be referred to as a Pekingese poodle of amazing pedigree called Percival. All beer will also be replaced with Cointreau, all soft drink will be replaced by Perrier sparkling mineral water, and all cold taps will be replaced with a constant flow of Chardonnay. When opening bills, I will now let out a hearty guffaw before handing it to my team of accountants to pay it on my behalf. My son Jackson will now have to change his name to something that screams, I hail from money! Torsten Moneytree Esquire III seems pretty apt here. We will invite the neighbours around for platters of cocaine-fed crayfish and then brag about our holiday home on an island that no one's ever heard of before. I will host my own business meetings and turn up in golf gear 3 hours late. There's a fair chance I won't have been playing golf before it either. Look, I'd go on, but I'm a shareholder. I'm too busy to rabble and all that. Things to do, people to see, sports teams to buy, you see. Maybe your people could organise a meeting with my people. We'll catch up over a bowl of smoked Wagyu when I buy my next hotel chain or something. Quick update, in 2022, I no longer have those shares. And finally, Chapter 30, turning the toolkit to television. Let's face it, the current crop of reality TV is pretty much a photocopy of what we were doing last year, which in turn was a photocopy of what we were doing the year before, and so on and so forth. It's either lose weight, singing, dancing, talent displaying, cooking, building, dating, trying your hardest not to stab anyone while stranded on an island, or not get hideously lost while racing around the planet. We've been there, done that, wash, rinse, repeat year in, year out. Yes, I know it works, and you build fan bases and loyalty and other things that equal the slightly different but pretty much actually the same series rating well, but come on, TV executives. Time to really light a fire under audiences before I throw a brick through my television for the next season of Australia's Got Biggest Blockmaster Kitchen Dance Love Rules. Luckily, if you are a TV producer looking for the next big idea, allow me to help you as only I can. Brilliant new ideas for reality TV. Number 1. On romance shows, the guy or girl is actually who they're portrayed to be. No more of this 20 high-maintenance women attempting to woo a guy who they think is a multimillionaire, but in reality he's actually a garbage collector. None of that rubbish. No more the beautiful woman at the end once sported a penis. Or this guy who vaguely represents royalty is actually a barman we found on the way to the TV studios kind of jazz. No, I want to see 20 normal women who hold jobs higher than a nail technician or beauty consultant compete for a date with a balding guy in his 30s with a slight beer gut, because he's actually a pretty down-to-earth guy, and not someone obsessed with carb counting or how his hair looks. No more guys from Bondi who couldn't change a spark plug to save themselves. I want real people chasing after real people. If the prize at the end is a Yugoslavian pirate impersonation expert, then damn it, I don't want to get to the end and have it ruined by producers telling me that he's actually a Mongolian prince pretending to walk with a limp. Number 2. No more intentionally stupid people. Rudimentary intelligence tests should be mandatory. If contestants applying for a reality TV show manage to flummox up the spelling of their own name on the entry form, they should not be immediately fast-tracked to episode 1. No, not every TV show should have an idiot for comic relief who attempts to build a dog kennel and winds up somehow creating an underground cellar complete with a spiral staircase and cocktail bar. And if you turn up with a twin that's equally as stupid as you are, and you admit this, then the only fast-tracking you should do is straight to the exit. Number 3. No skills, no TV time. Crazy, I know, but if you front up to make a name for yourself on a cooking show, then a ridiculously basic level home economics qualification, or even an attempt at campfire cooking at a bare minimum, should be somewhere on your resume. No more, you look pretty but you'll burn water, so we'll enroll you in a cooking class the day we start filming. Just giggle a lot or cry to mask your complete lack of culinary ability. Personality is one thing, but if I'm watching a show on brain surgery, I'm sure as hell hoping one of those people with the scalpel has actually opened up a head before. Number 4. The living quarters must not look nicer than the living rooms we watch the show in. The cast of Beauty and the Geek live in a mansion. I Want to Marry Harry, a castle. Even the big house in The Biggest Loser actually looks like an incredibly comfortable place to crash in when the commando is done grunting at you for the day. Therefore, if you're in the running for more money over 10 weeks than the average Joe makes in 5 years, then you should have your living arrangements scaled down appropriately. I'm thinking disused asylums, junkyards, and even your local minimum security wing as valid alternatives. You won't care that you've slept behind bars for a couple of months if you suddenly make $250,000 after 10 weeks of filming. And if you don't win the coin, well, congratulations on surviving a 10-week character building exercise. Number 5. No sob stories. Oh God, enough of your sob stories. Ratings gold, cringeworthy moments more like. Especially midway through the season, a contestant has a breakdown after cutting a carrot or missing a note or something, and you discover they entered the show in memory of a dead budgie that once taught them how to cook pancakes and steered them away from a life of stealing cars, and come hell or high water, or the elimination episode, they were going to go as far as they possibly could and release that album of Hawaiian heavy metal hula hits no matter what. The only crying on TV should be after watching Blackadder's Goodbye episode or Futurama when Fry finds his long-lost dog. Nothing else. Number 6. Leave the Z-grade celebrities alone. If we didn't enjoy them before, we sure as hell won't enjoy them anymore when you teach them how to tap dance through rings of fire while attempting to sing in French. Actually, come to think of it, I should copyright that one. Number 7. Replace any or all judges with people you find at your local pub directly after happy hour. Yes, no more long-winded diatribes of the aesthetics of putting garnish on your second-story bungalow and how it marries up to the essence of the goldfish-filled elevator, scoring you a possible 7 out of 53 from an expert on toilet seats because they didn't like your choice of ferns. No, instead, give the judging to Gazza the Brickie, who will look at it, your performance, or eat it if it's a cooking show, and belch out a number that you can't actually whine about, because you would not want to get on his bad side. No wasted words, just a grunt from Gaz, and a quick scratch if he's up to it, and on to the next display. Number 8. The show goes for half an hour maximum. Wait, will this eliminate those "we'll find out your score and if anything actually happens after the break" moments? Good. Less fluff, more to the point. Number 9. Take your book of usual stereotypes and burn it. Super buff but dumb as a bag of hammers? Out. Incredibly geeky but has never kissed a girl? Go away. Singing hopeful that started singing before they started on solid food? No more. For the love of variety, please give me more people that I'm not sick to death of. Heavily tattooed foreign kleptomaniacs who grin like idiots when caught knocking stuff off. Foul-mouthed Asian mechanics that only eat drive-through. Illegal graphic design students with wild crazy hair that'd be fun to have a beer with. Guitar-playing PE teachers with speech impediments who are actually half robot. Just anything than the usual mix of whingers, whiners, talentless hacks, criers, and egotistical wanks. Please, reality TV, for the love of everything, can you try something different?